Thank you. We are on the record.
Okay, we're good?
We are good. Thank you.
Okay, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you, Roxanne. Certainly thank you to all the staff that's been able to assemble everything that's all put together. When we walked in the room this morning, everything was laid out and perfect. I probably put credit toward Jamie.
It's all Jamie.
I kind of thought
and
so.
Glenn,
Thank
yes,
you.
he helped.
Thank you, Jamie, and everyone else involved. It looks great. I appreciate for the great treatment that we're afforded here. Okay, take care of a little bit of business here first. I do have to read this from the top of the agenda. Notice of the January 25th, 2018 meeting of the Board of Examiners for Land Surveyors was posted to the Board of Examiners for Land Surveyors website on January 17th, 2018. All right, with that being said, I certainly want to welcome everybody that's in attendance. We do have some guests that are here, and certainly invite anyone that wants to attend our meetings. These meetings are open to the public, open to surveyors of all across the state. So you're certainly more than welcome, and I think I can speak for the other members here that we encourage you to attend these meetings as well. So thank you for attending on the front end there. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and start with the agenda and the business items of hand. Of course, we have the call to order was the first item. I think I've done that. And the second item is to adopt the agenda. I trust that the members here have had an opportunity to look at the agenda scheduled for today that was published. Are there any changes or amendments to the agenda that we need to make? Roxanne, anything we need to address on the agenda?
I don't think so. I think we're good the way it was published with minor items as applications that we go through at the end, so I think we're okay.
The information that I sent you, we're going to address as new business?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I'll certainly entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and second. Any further discussion? If not, by voice vote, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, with that, the agenda as published is adopted. Next item, review and approve the minutes from the October 26th, 2017 minutes as published. You have a copy of it on your iPad.
Mr. Chair, I have not had the ability to review this.
Okay.
It was not in my package
Okay.
that we receive, and so I would like to take a moment to review what is on the iPad.
That's fair enough. We can certainly do that. If y'all are comfortable with having read the minutes, I'll entertain a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to respectfully apologize to those in the audience that are here because we had to take time to read them. I have read them, and I do make a motion that they be approved.
Very good. Motion on the floor for approval.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none by voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. With that, the minutes of the October 26, 2017 minutes have been approved. Next item on the agenda, moving down, Kentucky Board of Examiners guests. Do we have them present today? I don't see
I
them.
knew they were coming, and so I figured we would go ahead and just, if at the last minute they show up, we would announce them. If not, they'll probably join us in April.
Have you heard anything further from
I
them?
have not, just
Have
the
not,
email
okay.
they sent, so I think we're
understand.
okay.
And that email was a while ago, was
It
not?
goes back to August 25th.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see then.
Yeah.
They're certainly more than welcome. We certainly look forward to having them with us today if they are able to show up. We'll see. All right. Hopefully we'll come back to that. All right. Moving on next to the education report. I think the board members here, if you'll look on your iPad, there should be a report in there of the listed seminars, classes, requested PDH approvals that have come through for administrative approval here. I'd ask you to look them over. If there's anything that stands out to you, we'll bring those to attention. There was one I saw that I wanted to bring up under Wilson & Associates. It was entitled Human Relations Principles, which I think really expand anything beyond that. That's really the only thing I have, so you can kind of form your own opinion as to what might be entailed there. Is that something that that you find credible for the requested 3 PDHs there?
I would be interested to know what the advisory board felt about that in order to approve it, and it'd have a CER number.
Right.
I was going to say, if it already has a CER number, the advisory board has approved it, right?
We're always behind on doing this approval.
Yeah.
Right, because we don't review them until we come together at the meeting. So if they've issued a number, then they've reviewed the information and are okay with it.
Once we see it, it's gone through approval of the advisory committee. They look at it, they're comfortable with it. This is just kind of a formal board approval, blanket approval of the ones that, and we can select individual ones if we choose for questioning or clarifications or anything like that. That was, from what I saw when I read through, that was the only one that really brought question in my mind. The others I'm comfortable with. Any other thoughts from y'all?
Well, typically before, when we had a question, we could get a response from the advisory board relative to this. I'm like you, Mr. Kaufman, not knowing a better definition or a syllabus of this particular item with question in mind. I think it's worthy of a response from the advisory board. And Ms. Roxanne, I think that could be something that may be handled by email to the board members, or
Absolutely.
in the interest of not delaying this individual. I have no idea if he's already given this class or when it's scheduled.
And point me on the Wilson Group. Which one of these are we talking about? The human?
Human relations
Okay.
principles? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess what all I'm asking for is a little clarification of the content of the
content.
material.
Yes.
And if we can pass that information by email and I'm comfortable with it and the other members are comfortable, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
But that's the only one that I had in mind. Is there any others that y'all see? Okay.
We will follow up at the end of this meeting asking them for more details because it's got the number. You're correct. They have tentatively approved it. And then we'll get that details through emails to the 3 board members. And if you're okay with approving it, as long as that's the case, we will continue. But if you have any concerns, we can always then pull it. Yes.
And again, Ms. Roxanne, this was not something that I received to review. I'm seeing it for the first time this morning.
You mean the list of them?
Yes, ma'am, this document here.
Okay.
Okay, so with that, I'll entertain a motion for approval, amending with the exception of human relations principles for review.
So moved.
All right, got a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion or items you need to discuss? All right, hearing none by voice vote, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. With that, we'll approve those as listed, excepting the one item that we'll get some clarification from staff. Okay. Moving on the agenda, I think we're to the legal report, is that correct?
If I
Maybe
could,
not, maybe not.
I think yes. I think
Okay.
you're correct. But if I could interrupt us, this
Yes,
is
ma'am.
our first meeting for the year, so I would like us to go ahead and on the record
Robert's
vote
rules.
to consider Robert's rules and following Robert's rules of standard practices. And if we've got any questions, Sarah can fill us in on it. But I think for the most part, we're probably familiar with it and can proceed.
She keeps saying that in every meeting.
Best we
but-
can.
But yet.
You've got your little handbook, don't you? They make a real small one, you know.
Yeah, I don't have that one.
Okay.
Mine are upstairs.
All right, with that being said, then I guess we'll entertain a motion for that as well for approval and acceptance of the Robert's Rules of Standard Practice, and we'll do the best we can, and I'm sure that if we fall out of line somewhere, that somebody on staff will certainly correct me.
I'll make
do the
that
best I
motion.
can.
And I'll second.
All right, motion and second by voice vote. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Good point. Thank you, Roxanne.
And the only other item we normally do with that is the chair and vice chair, but we did that in October, correct?
August,
Before
I think it was?
We switched, yes.
Something
And
like that.
so we should be perfectly good with that. I just wanted to put that on the record as well to cover that all the way through this calendar year. Thank you. Okay, now we are on the legal report. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, did you all receive a copy of the legal report and have a chance to review it?
I think we did, yes.
Okay, I'll just ask a general question. Do you all have questions on the 3 cases? Rob and Ryan prepared this, and she is working from home, so if we have questions, we're going to call her, and she'll be here to answer questions. But I just wanted to make sure we didn't call her for no reason before we get started.
Dan, I don't recall having any questions offhand, but we'll see how we go here. Will you be reading them through?
I can
like we
read them
standard
into
do?
the record, or...
I think that'd be best.
Okay. So the first one is 2017065591. The complainant is the owner and states that the land was surveyed by respondent. Complainant states that survey was not acceptable to buyer as engineer, for buyer's stated survey was incorrect. Drawing did not show how many acres, number on drawing did not add up to 1 acre, and did not provide the source of information. Respondent states complainant never requested a deed description but wanted an explanation of how property was surveyed. Respondent states respondent was hired to mark the property corners and make a drawing. Respondent states complaint is not specific, only that the property does not contain exactly 1 acre. This one was reviewed, and there were some reviewer findings. The reviewer states survey as provided by complainant, signed and dated, has the missing items as stated above. Reviewer states surveyor's copy not signed or dated does show area and owner's name. Robin's recommendation was $1,000 civil penalty for a violation of 6218-116B and 8 hours of continuing education in the standards and practice.
Well, the first question I had was that, and I guess to go back to your original question, yes, I did have some questions.
Okay.
But I was not getting the flavor of where you were going with the legal report because you approached it in a different manner than we normally approach it. No disrespect.
Okay.
Okay.
No, you just have to tell us how you want it done,
Okay.
because
Well,
it'll be Robin.
the way you just did it is the way that we normally prefer to have it done, read into the record, so then we can discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just going to have to call her because I didn't prepare this, so I can't answer questions. I haven't seen the file, so go ahead and call her.
We're sorry.
That's awesome. It's like the old game shows. With
We
the
need a
lifeline.
9. That's the tricky
Yeah,
number.
lifeline.
We'll get there.
So much for the lifeline.
I'd call a friend.
You're on your own, Sarah.
I know. I'm like, we're in big trouble. Hey.
This is Robin Ryan.
Hey, Robin, can you hear us?
Hey.
Okay, we just read number 1 into the record, and they have some questions for you.
Yeah, I saw that. I heard
Perfect.
that. Okay.
She's watching you guys live
Oh,
stream.
There are great things.
We can't get away with talking about you then, can we, Miss Robin?
Yeah, you can't talk
Not
about
much,
it.
Not unless you want to say something really nice, you can get away with that.
Well, certainly, that's all we'll say about you is very nice.
Your question?
The first question I had was, it notes that the reviewer states that the surveyor's copy is not signed and dated. Is that because well, in this case, the word here says surveyor, but we don't deal with cases with that word. We normally deal with complainant and respondent for a more correct generic.
Well, let me explain that. Yeah, as there were two different copies, of course. There was the surveyor's own copy, and I should have said respondent's copy. Was not signed or dated, but it does show the area and the owner's name. But the one provided to the complainant that was signed and dated had the missing items as noticed by the reviewer.
The signed copy had the missing items. Mm-hmm. So it's the official copy.
So the document provided to the complainant was the surveyor's work product, or the respondent's. Let me get my words right. Was the respondent's work product, and that particular document was reviewed by the case reviewer, and the items that the case reviewer mentions in the legal report were what were deficient.
That's correct, although the reviewer reviewed both documents, the one provided by the respondent himself or herself and the one that was provided by the complainant. And that was the issue, and that was the problem that the reviewer saw.
Okay. Well, clearly that is an issue when a licensee presents two products, one to the client and then one to someone else. That's clearly an issue.
Becky, any questions?
It says that he was hired to mark the property corners and make a drawing. That's a pretty broad-based statement in make a drawing. I mean, does he make a drawing that said this was a property survey, a general property survey?
This is what was provided to me, basically. In his statement, he said, or she said, I was hired to mark the property corners and make a drawing. And that is what was provided as the reason for the hiring in the first place.
But it also speaks that the complainant says that the survey was not acceptable to a buyer based on an engineer for the buyer's review. But it does not stipulate other than just the acres. Is all the stipulation is there.
Well, what the complainant was saying is the complainant had this piece of property. It was surveyed for the purposes of being bought. And the engineer for that person buying it said, no, the survey can't be correct because the drawing doesn't show how many acres, it does not add up to 1 acre, and it didn't provide any source of information. That was from the engineer. I did not have anything in the complaint from the engineer initially. I just have the complainant's words.
Here's my point here, and maybe as devil's advocate, I'm not sure, but it states that the copy that was provided by the complainant was signed and dated. That makes that the official product. The sign, the stamp, the signature, the date, that's the official product. And that official product, if I'm reading it correctly and I understand it correctly, says that it was signed, dated, and contained the missing items as listed. So the final signed, stamped product contains all the required information.
The final stamped product does not contain all the information. That is the problem. When we have these matters reviewed, the reviewer looks at the entire file and anything provided to us by the complainant and the respondent themselves. And what the reviewer reviewed was the official copy that given to the complainant and what the respondent provided, which was not the same. By the way, these recommendations, the reviewers often do their recommendations as well, and I took some of the recommendations from also the review and the analysis from the reviewer.
I guess I need clarification here, just and keep it in simple layman's terms so I can understand what is containing the information and not. And let me just ask it by question here. The copy that contains the stamp, the signature, and the date does or does not contain all the items here that are listed as being missing.
The missing items are the items missing from the document that was signed and dated and given to the complainant.
Violation.
So the answer is does not.
And does not, yes.
Does not.
That's the way I would interpret it.
Okay. If I have,
But then,
yeah, go ahead.
taking it a step further, it sounds like when the respondent provided the survey to the board to a reviewer, he provided a copy that wasn't signed,
But had everything on.
but had everything on it that they
Right.
were saying was so.
Right.
That's correct.
Well, in my opinion, me personally talking, if a survey contains the stamp and the signature and the date, that is the official, final, professional opinion product, and
Yep.
it is to adhere to the minimum standards. And if I
Yep.
understand it correctly, it appears that it does not contain or is not in compliance with the listed minimum standards by these 4 items that are listed. If I can get to that page. Oh, I hate these things. All right, what am I doing wrong? The 4 items that are listed.
That's why I printed.
The area, the vicinity map, the north arrow, and the owner of the adjacent. Thank you. I'm just retarded.
Don't touch it.
Yeah, don't touch your hands off. So if that is the case, and I am understanding this correctly, then I would say that the respondent is in violation, as is found by the summary here, and my understanding by the reviewer as well. And with that, I would recommend that we accept the recommended civil penalty and recommended. There's discussion by others.
Let's look at the recommendation.
I
The
think I know where you're
civil penalty follows suit with the statute. I have no problem with that. But the continuing education part speaks to 8 hours of continuing education in standards of practice. I don't know where we get that.
Well, I take that as
Fairly.
being what is already required. Well, that's true. 8 hours. 8 hours is difficult.
Right.
The 2 hours, or really just the 1 hour,
Well,
is more common. Yeah, the 8 hours is a little bit strong. I don't know how you get 8 hours of standards of practice.
Well, and when we speak to the violation is relative to incompetency, misconduct, or gross negligence. And when we speak to that, that's also an ethical concern. So I feel like that we could address the standards of practice along with some type of ethical continuing education. Heretofore, we've sent cases to, for example, the University of Phoenix has like a 8-hour ethics course. They did. I would be more in tune to, because this is a Tennessee registrant, to the 2-hour standards of practice, and with the understanding that that's in addition to the normal that he has to have for his regular license review. This is over and above because it's dealing with a complaint. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think we need to modify that, and I'm certainly open to your all's pleasure.
Jackie?
Well, I agree with that part, but if also it makes reference to incompetency, misconduct, and gross negligence, which, like you said, it's ethical issues. So should we, in addition to 2 hours for standards of practice, require another 4 or 6 in ethics?
Yes.
I'd be willing to go along with that.
What number are you comfortable with on ethics then?
4.
Okay. Well, if we're there, I'll attempt to make a motion.
And let me
Yes, ma'am.
just address this so you all will understand too. What we generally do with these as far as the education goes, the consent order will say these hours are in addition to anything that is already required, and generally the licensee has 180 days to complete them. And if they don't complete the hours within 180 days, it is an automatic suspension until they show completion.
And let me ask a question here, Ms. Robin, if I may.
Sure.
When the board does discipline of this nature and the respondent accepts the consent order, does the board have the ability to review what the respondent submits? For example, let's say the respondent went to an unapproved vendor and they got a course that was, pardon me?
It has to be an approved.
Has to be an
course.
approved vendor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. it
Okay.
does.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because I didn't want it to smoke and mirrors. I didn't want it to look like it was ethics or standards,
Right.
and in reality, it was not.
They have to submit to Jamie, the board office, a certificate of completion of that course, and it has to be one that is approved by the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we do this
Okay.
all the time with our
Okay.
appraisers.
Okay. I just want to make sure. Make sure.
And again, if they're in violation of any portion of the consent order, including something like that, then the license and it would be automatically suspended after 180 days.
Okay. Okay. Having said that, thank you very much, Miss Robin, and Sarah too. I'll make a motion that for this case we have $1,000 civil penalty. We have 4 hours of ethics continuing education and 2 hours of standards of practice continuing education.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, is there any further discussion on that? All right, hearing none, by voice vote, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, with that, the motion is passed for an amended recommendation
Perfect.
on that case. All right, Ms. Sarah, if we can move on to item number 2, please.
Perfect. Number 2 is 2017-07-1551. Complainant hired respondent for survey and negotiated a price of $3,500. Complainant states after survey was completed, respondent charged $7,000 and the parties renegotiated a price of $5,000. Complainant states when survey received, survey states that complainant had 14.21 acres, but the county has the land at 30 acres. Complainant states complainant has attempted to contact respondent, but respondent has not responded. Respondent states they did contact complainant to discuss issues and states respondent was not aware of any calls to respondent not answered. Respondent states that in the survey, respondent noted the acreage of 14.241 for complainant's portion inherited from parents and 5.197 acres for a second tract that was contiguous with the property that was inherited from the parents to the sister. Respondent states complainant states error in acreage is due to fairly recent survey by the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency or a third party on their behalf. This was reviewed, and the reviewer found no violations of the laws or rules, no incompetence, no conflict of interest, and no misconduct. Reviewer believes issues between complainant and respondent will be resolved, but suggests respondent update regarding resolution. Robin's recommendation was to dismiss.
Yeah, it appears to me from the information provided here that really this is a civil case, perhaps some poor business practices, perhaps some poor communication skills, but I don't see anything here directly related to the board's purview. Is there anything we see here?
The only thing that was curious in the whole synopsis of it was that the respondent states claimant states area and acreage is due to a fairly recent survey by TWRA or a third party. You know, without seeing that document relative to the other, you know, there may be something there. But again, as the chairman said, based on the face, we don't have anything to move forward with. And I make a motion that we dismiss it.
All right, motion on the floor for dismissal.
Second.
All right, by voice vote, those in favor to accept the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Number 3 is 2016-055-171.
By the way, before you go on, this is a representation.
Okay, so this is a representation. And it looks like last time the board decided to place this in litigation monitoring by a consent order. And Robin has updated it to say that the respondent did a pretrial agreement and received 8 years of diversion, which is not a conviction. Should he complete the 8 years of diversion, he can petition the court for the matter to be expunged. If he does anything criminal in violation of the diversion, the matter will go forward. Robin's recommendation at this time is to close and flag it should the diversion fail.
Diversion is it's a good program for criminal cases, and it's a second chance program, is what it is. Every case is different. Every case of diversion, in my experience that I've seen, is different. But it does put a lot of restrictions and guidance on the defendant there, and it's a good thing. And really, that's what boils down to here, as I read it. This is an opportunity for a second chance. I'm a believer in second chances myself. Although, obviously what is claimed here against the defendant is it's pretty egregious, really. But it doesn't. Go ahead, Robin.
I was just going to say, I doubt if they could have gone forward with everything they had, then he would have been awarded a pretrial diversion and 8 years. I seriously doubt that. That's not saying that he's totally innocent, but it does say that apparently the criminal side of it also had issues with what they had,
right,
and they were very comfortable doing it this way.
Right.
I guess if I had a question, and I always do, the timing of the representation, when it spoke to earlier in the synopsis that the respondent had until January 23, 2017, basically to accept this deal. Mm-hmm. And we're, I think, in 2018, we're a year out. So that's the only question I have, and I'm not meaning that disrespectful towards you, Miss Robin, or anyone else.
I don't believe we got the final result until just recently, and that's not atypical either. If any of you, and hopefully the answer is no, if any of you have ever been involved in any criminal matters, they set dates, and those dates are constantly pushed out. So this was resolved in 2017, and we got it at the end of 2017, so I could present it on this next report.
That was just more of a question of curiosity than anything.
Yeah.
Because you are correct. I know nothing about criminal proceedings and don't want to. Jay is our law enforcement officer. He knows more about them than he cares to.
The interesting thing, gentlemen, and this is very interesting, is that in a pretrial diversion, and I wrote this down, but the entire thing can be expunged, which means it will never exist. And that is indeed how the criminal department looks at it as well. So this person does have an opportunity to go forward and do the right thing. It's a long period of time, 8 years, but if he does complete it, the record goes away.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the recommendation and close and flag the file, should the diversion fail.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to accept the recommendation from staff. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, with a motion and a second, any further questions or discussion?
I assume, Miss Robin, that you all are on a regular notice situation, since this is one of the licensees of this board, should this individual fail.
We would be checking up with it periodically, yes.
Thank you.
And what that means is I'd be checking back, our staff would be checking back with the criminal division to see if anything has happened in it.
All right, with that, we have a motion and a second. We had further discussion. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor to accept the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, with that, the motion and second and vote is approved.
Robin, thank you, and we'll see you next meeting in April.
We didn't get her to see her this time.
Thank you.
We heard her, but we didn't get to see her.
Yeah, but she can see you all.
Oh,
That's right.
Aha, don't forget.
That's her loss.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
All right, I think that handles the disciplinary report. We're still on legal report. Looks like there's some other items to discuss there.
Yes, and I will let Sarah fill you in on those two other pending items.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Jay, I believe you added the update for Chapter 66 to the agenda.
That was on a suggestion from Tim. Was there something you wanted to expand on that?
Well, I just think that we need to begin looking at that and formulating that towards the new information that will be coming up for 2022.
So I did talk to my supervisors about that update and who would take care of that. And so basically, they just said at this point what we would want to do is when we know that's coming out, so 2022, we would want to put it in a legislative proposal like we normally do. and it would go through the department as our administrative bill. So that's how that would be carried.
How much lead time do we need to effectively get that in the system so that when 2022 does come about, that we're up to date and not running behind?
Our legislative proposals for 2018 were due for us in June of 2017. So when this board meets in, April of 2021, that's when they would want to make that proposal. So I guess the question there would be, are they going to have everything complete from the U.S. coordinate side at that time for us to be able to adopt exactly what they have, if that's how we want to go about that? Or would it be something that we wouldn't know what it was going to say until 2022 when it went into effect? Then it might be something that can't go in effect until Tennessee until
Right.
2023 session.
Normally I like to get ahead of the game on things like that, but knowing the source of where this is coming from and the magnitude of what's entailed here, I suspect things may change before now in 2022. But I definitely would like to keep this on the calendar and open for discussion such that as these modifications come about, and I think I even saw some discussion on this last week, I think, on the federal level. So it is an active discussion. It is actively moving through the federal government. But I certainly don't want to drop this, and I definitely want to make sure that Tennessee is on the front end of this and not trying to play catch up when it does come about. So I guess we'll just table it for discussion for today's meeting, but I certainly want to keep it on the calendar for future. And obviously we as a board collectively need to keep our eyes and ears open as to where the federal level is going on this as well. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, Mr. Chair, I just there's a couple sections in our old blue book here that we might want to touch on as time goes on periodically, so that they are interrelated to this particular major change, and we may need to touch on those so that when we do it, we do a more of a broad brush effect to catch all component parts and not just this one specific part.
Right.
If I could add, just because, exactly as our chair has said, if we address it consistently as things change, it becomes muddy and we kind of lose what we really want to address in the time frame. But we're very blessed, or this profession is, with having an organization, TAPS, that meets throughout the state and kind of discusses these things. So I think feedback from them staying on top of it, the professionals themselves, anything that is important that you think maybe even in 2020 we may need to start addressing, that may be a time frame in which we can start looking at it. But what we probably don't want to do is start on a rule that then we'll have to change. And so we definitely are going to not let us get behind on it, but we don't want to start something that would change then again.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Okay, I think we're good there. All right, Ms. Sarah, next item.
So the next item is the status of the GPS rules. We held a rulemaking hearing in October, which was my first one, and I thought it went very well. And I can tell you that those rules were filed with the Secretary of State's office on January 11th, and they will be effective as of April 11th, 2018. And most likely, Roxana and I will appear before the Government Operations Committee in March of 2018. Essentially, we just have to go in front of them and give them our talking points and answer any questions. Since these rules were pretty straightforward, I don't assume that they'll have any questions. And I mean, I don't think they'll reject our rules at this point. So
Okay,
all should be good.
Just as a side note, there was an email that was distributed out last night. I believe it was from this office, actually, about just that with the
Our
April 18th
e-notify
date.
should have gone out, yeah.
In fact, as I was driving up here last night, I received more than one phone call about that last night. I was like, what? So I was glad to see that, because I have received several people, registrants, ask me, when are the new rules coming into effect? And quite honestly, my answer was, I don't know. It's working its way through the process. But I'm glad to report from the email that came out last night that there is progress being made, and now we have a date.
Yes, absolutely.
So we have a date, so that's good to see. So hopefully every registrant has received that same email, and we can certainly bring that up for discussion. Obviously with the efforts that you have to make, I'm sure TAPS will have some discussion on it as well. But it's good to see that we'll finally get that going. Comments? Good? Okay. Next item?
I think the last little legal note is legislation. Thus far, Roxana and I have received no bills for the land surveyors portion. That does not mean that won't happen. Filing deadline is next Friday. So But thus far, nothing from our end.
I'm kind of a regular browser on the legislative website. I do check not only the surveyors topics, but several others, engineering, architects, and several other entities that roundabout affect surveying. I have not seen anything really of concern, even to bring up to either TAPS or other surveyors or this board, to be honest with you. So I guess no news is good news.
I can tell you all around in this building, it's been a, knock on wood, a quiet session.
It's been quiet. All right.
I have an understanding, Mr. Chairman, that there's a possibility that there may be a piece of legislation for surveyors about QBS.
Really?
Yep.
I hope it's going.
Yes, sir.
That's good to hear. So they got till Friday, is that right, if I understood?
Yes, they have until Friday the 2nd.
Okay. All right. Well, our eyes open for that. Other than that, I don't have anything to add to it. Anybody else? Good there? Okay. All right. I think that covers the items on the legal report, Sarah, unless you have something you need to add to it.
Nope, that's it for me.
Good there? Great. Thank you. Excellent information, as always. All right, Roxana, Director's Report.
Thank you. Give me a minute to open up our financial numbers here. Here we go. Okay, so we'll start with the easy part, which is the first page on your financial documents has the history for the last 4 years since we met. That this has been the 2016-2017 fiscal year has closed. Of course, as you all know, even more than I do, that's the year where we don't have the income coming in. It didn't start, and you'll see in a page, straggling in until September. So, but we're in line with what historically we have had for the year where we don't collect it. So I'm not concerned unless the board has any questions on page 1 where we have, but I like you always seeing that 4-year analysis so you can kind of see where we are. The cost backs I will touch on briefly just for information regarding how legal services are going to be distributed. We had informed the board before that we're going to have a very good way to kind of predict cost backs, administrative, legal, and so forth, and we're doing it on a monthly basis. That'll be on that last page that you see. But effective probably for December's figures, the way legal is charged back to each program is no longer based on number of licensees and complaints. Attorneys are keeping track of their time, so bless them for doing that. We actually, yes. So where it does impact us, not only is like Robin's time working on cases, Sarah's time obviously is on the travel for meetings that we go to. We want to very wisely have our attorneys go so that they can learn and keep us abreast of things and have. But those are the meetings in which and the time where we're going to be picking up a lot of expense. So just something to think about. I think anytime we've got well-needed attorneys' time, we need to definitely have them involved, but we'll be considering that where before that wasn't an impact, if you will. That's the only change I think to report there. And then if you'll look at the last page on the distribution of expenses, you can see in September our revenue did slightly go up. You know, we went from $250. Those are really civil cases, if you will, that we're picking up to all of a sudden in September, $16,000, I think. 35,037, and so we're obviously going to cover PSI and the renewals and all that, but that's that impact. We literally sent out renewals 5 weeks early this renewal cycle. My hope was to get ahead of the December late timers and get some of this done early. So we see an amount, just not huge in September, October, and November. So nothing drastically. I think we'll be right in line with everything else. So that's the piece on the financial numbers to report, and we can skip on to PSI unless you all have a question on any of these numbers.
Please do.
Okay, so that is our budget. On PSI, I do want to report that we launched the new state-specific exam as we had predicted. We'd hoped it was sooner, but December 11th still was a good date. That's when we went live. We submitted every applicant at that point that had been approved by the board. Right now we have 15 applicants scheduled to take the exam, but still pending out there. And I checked these numbers last week just to make sure I wouldn't forget about checking them or not give you a quick update. So they've got 2 years from the time we submit them to pass the exam and complete without us having to touch the information. Of those that have registered and taken the exam, we have 3 that have passed. And so those are 3 that have passed the state-specific exam that Mr. Lingerfeld helped us work on, and that since we're on this piece, we want to talk about the next step to do with that. So
How many have actually sat down and taken the exam?
3 have taken the exam, and all 3 at this point have passed. So that exam started out, I want to say, with 77 questions maybe when we reviewed it, and then we found a lot of duplicates or things, and so I think we whittled it down to about 68 questions. It's right under 70, 68, 69 that are on there. So since we're on the subject, part of the contract, of course, was putting together subject matter experts to review, and we had projected wanting to do this in June. So rather than to leave it for the April meeting, if the board wants to discuss kind of, do we want to do it in June? Would you rather try to do it earlier? We'll come up with volunteers, if you will, licensees that can be pulled in that are experts in this. I'm assuming the board will probably be comfortable, or we'll need to vote on Mr. Lingerfeld still participating in this. While it's all fresh and we can do it again, this will be a chance to add to our question database, and PSI will guide us in that.
I'm always in favor of let's get it done. June seems like a good ways away, 6+ months, or 6 months, I guess, really. It'll be here before you know it. But I always like to, let's just jump in there and get it done, unless there's some restrictive reason that we can't proceed with it. The only question I can think of in my mind was, do we need to allow time for applicants to be taking the exam? It sounds like only 3 have at this point, such that we can create somewhat of a better feel of what is working and what's not working. Now, a sample of 3 is not much to work from. Now, granted, we only have 15 applicants, so at best we would have 15. At this point, we'd have 15, which again is not a lot to work from, but we're limited in numbers to begin with.
That's right.
But I'm always in favor of especially since this is new, it's going to need some work, and obviously it's going to be evolving as it progresses down the road. But I say let's go ahead and formulate a team of registrants for review and discussion of the exam as it exists. And certainly I'd be in favor of continuing Mr. Lingerfeld's oversight on it, if he's in favor of that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one question before we get to the second part.
Yes, sir.
First question, Ms. Roxanne, is where did the 2-year window of time for the CBT exam come from?
That's really just a time frame for the data to not expire within PSI. So we can resubmit them to continue testing. But if, for example, we approve applicants and Jamie puts them in and they don't do anything, they don't test for 2 years, all that happens is their name shows that they need to come back to us and just be resubmitted by us in case they've moved, something has changed. It's just kind of a technology issue so that they can get back into the database.
I understand that our state-specific CBT is different than the CBT for FS and PS, but having been on the exam writing committee with NCWS, there was extensive research done relative to the comments that you just made about technology, length of exam, etc. That was determined that the 1-year window was the more appropriate window to use. And the reason I asked that question was I don't remember that question being brought up in our PSI conference call that we had, nor do I remember it being brought up before this board. So I was wondering where it actually came from.
I think it's just a technology thing. So if the board wants the applications to expire within a year, we can have them change that. It's really just especially since our numbers are low.
Well, and I understand our numbers are low, and from experience with NCWS, we've learned that for some reason with the CBT examination, there's a huge procrastination. They'll get approved, and then they kind of like, I don't know if I'm ready, and put it off and put it off. They may even, NCWS has found a tremendous influx of income from people that have actually registered to take the exam, paid the fee, and then don't show up.
Correct.
And then I think there was one that you'll find this interesting. It's just a trivial bit of information. It means nothing in the real world. But there was one applicant for the PE examination that applied, paid, and didn't show up 47 times. And that was like $275 a pop. So for whatever it's worth, so that was a great influx of income to the NCAAS. But that has been the experience with the CBT exam, is that for some reason people sign up and they just don't want to show up, or they feel like that maybe I'm not ready today.
To be, and I hate to the devil's advocate. So if we just do 1 year instead of 2 and they expire, what is the purpose of us having to put them back in instead of them staying in there for 2 years? I guess that's.
Well, in the NCAAS world, what they do is they allow an applicant to take a CBT examination 3 times within a 12-month window. The 12-month window starts at first exam. Okay, so in other words, if you're approved in January, but you don't actually register and take the exam until April, that's when your window starts. So they have a window from that point of time. They're allowed to take 3 examinations. And if they fail all 3 examinations, then they got to sit out a year. So, I think that that's prudent, because our statute says that after failure the second time.
That's different. That we've built that in there. So the failure is different.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is they would be allowed to take the examination twice within a 2-year window. Is that what I hear you say?
No, I'm saying their record's going to be open for them to decide when to take it for 2 years, and they may not even register. If after 2 years they go in to register, PSI is going to shoot us a note saying Mr. Smith is wanting to register. He has expired. As far as can you tell us he's still okay?
And when does that notification take place? I mean, when is the starting date?
From the time we submit them to PSI,
Okay.
2 years later. So if it's
Okay.
on January 18th, it's January 18th, 2 years later, and they may do nothing.
And PSI does understand that it's only a 2 exam window for that individual period.
Correct, and the whole they can only they've got only 2 attempts to fail, and then they notify us. That's a separate rule. So that failure is within a 1 year time frame. That they can only fail it twice, and then the board would have to review and approve them again. So that's a separate block that we've
Okay,
put in.
so what you're saying is you have 2 blocks.
Correct.
You have the 1 year 2 failure block, and then you have the 2 year
Just for the data to be there. That's all it is. That's why I'm
Widen the
asking.
window.
To register and
Okay,
start
all right.
the
On
clock
that
run.
basis of explanation, I
Right.
don't have an issue with that.
Right, and that's the reason we didn't, it's not part of the contract. It's kind of that technology thing that by then maybe they've moved, changed names, these different variables, and we would just put them back in unless we'd have a reason for, criminal, something else came up.
Okay, no, I'm good with that.
Sounds good.
Now that you've
Yeah.
explained it,
Yeah.
I just was not wrapping my arms around.
Right.
around
And their
that
contract
scenario.
has a full year to pass the exam or 2 failures in there, so that piece is there. So with that, I think I'm great and agree with Jay that not waiting until June may be prudent, and if we don't have enough statistics, we'll just kind of decide there. It's just a matter of us getting more questions so that the experts are comfortable with more questions in the database.
Well, our exam, I'll just make this brief comment. Our exam is not the same exam as it was a year ago.
Right.
Primarily because there were question scenarios that required either essay or performance in some other manner by the test taker. And we do not have those currently in the exam, and those are desperately needed to be added back. So the results of 3 for 3 are exactly what I anticipated with the format that we currently have.
I agree. So we can start the process of, and if the board is in agreement and Mr. Lingerfeld, you are willing, then we can start reaching out, getting some names of who, and have more than one additional land surveyor available to work with the exams. PSI will send us the information, how to prepare to write questions, and then I'll let them, the board will pick up that piece of the expense. And so we will decide, I'm guessing we'll do 3 days, something along those lines. One is too short, a full week's too long, but we'll need to sit together to come up with these questions and debate and do that. And maybe May, April, somewhere along those lines could work.
Roxanne, as far as the body that will compromise this, are you looking for, obviously for registrants throughout the state, are you looking for volunteers to send in email requests that, be considered? Are you looking for names submitted by us to provide to you? How do you want to create that?
I think in other programs, so that we don't have 70, 80, more emails of individuals that I wouldn't know their quality of knowledge, it would be great to come from you being in the industry. TAPS members obviously can reach out to you as well with recommendations. You want individuals that if they have any experience doing exams, as Mr. Lingerfeld can add, it's no fun drafting questions. It sounds easy. It is not easy. Drafting then the answers is also not easy as far as the wrong answers and all that. And if we're wanting to come up with things to make the exam closer to what it was, then it's even trickier because we've got to come up with all those things. So you want some individuals, if possible, that have experience in that, have participated in things like that. And then, of course, we pay the per diem for them, their travel. But still, it's a commitment of time, those that would be able to do this.
Yep.
We want to give them plenty of notice. So April may be too soon, but maybe the end of April to the middle of May. And we find a week that works. So if the board can send me some names that we can work with, and sometimes too many people doesn't work. So we definitely will let PSI guide us based on the fact that maybe by then 25 people will have taken it and they'll have some statistics, or 20 people. Then they'll let us know we really only want 3 members. That could be the case. And I will definitely be there. Sarah will be there. We participated in the last one, so we'll have that knowledge, and we will really focus on adding to this database.
Idea of how many you're looking for? I think, did I hear 3?
We will probably select at the end 2 or 3, and then Mr. Lingerfeld. So if we even had 6, 7 names, that would be great, because they will possibly not accept it because it just doesn't work. So we don't want to keep going at it. I'd rather have more names, have more people say, yes, I can do it, and then we go from there. Sounds good?
Em, anything you want to follow on that?
No, that's fine.
All right, great. Good information. Thank you, Roxanna.
You're welcome.
All right, is there an update on the renewal process?
Yes, absolutely. So as we sort of stated, looking at the budget, we sent out the renewals the first week of September. I had a game plan of how that would go. It didn't go the way I envisioned it. So you learn from it. One of the problems that we did have is we did I want to say December 14th, I ran our statistics. We still showed 787 candidates not having completed. So we started the renewal cycle with 1,133 active land surveyors. Several have gone inactive or retired since there. I believe we're at closer to 1,120, right at about there. So it's not huge numbers. But of course, during the renewal cycle, they're asked if you're 65 and just no longer using the license, you can go ahead and put it to inactive status or retire and so forth. So we did have some of those numbers change that way, but the report that we ran at the middle of December, my intent was through email notify to get everybody to know, by the way, this is a courtesy. If you're getting this, you haven't done both pieces. It's not to say you haven't tried or mailed or gotten one but not the other, but we don't have both. That email, unfortunately, did not actually go out, I believe, until the 29th, if I'm correct. So, it was a disaster. It paralyzed our office. We won't even go down that window because we thought it had gone out. And anyway, just like Sarah's that was dated January 11th should have gone out way before now, and you just got it. So we are hoping, keep working with technology, and we'll get there. So that didn't go really well, but as the board knows, those licensees have all the way until January 31st, that grace period, to really get the funds in and still be perfectly okay to work, because that grace period allows them to work during this time and submit everything. So with that in mind, the great news is we only have, of the 1,133 we started with, 107 have done nothing. So to this morning, and so that's fantastic, because in 2015, what little I could look at numbers, because numbers are sometimes a snapshot in time, but what little I could see of correspondence, we had close to 300 rolling into February that we had nothing on and hadn't been touched. So compared to that, we did great. I think another plus is this time we didn't bring in a temp to work the items, because the feedback I'd gotten from the temp is they weren't accurate. And so Jamie, and I just can't thank her enough, she's literally not stopped talking, emailing, corresponding, plugging away at it, because it's still a manual process. As much as you go online and do it, there's still a lot of steps that we have to touch. So the 107, I think, is a fantastic number. The 233 other ones have either paid or submitted some of their CE, not all. Jamie has a lot of them pending back and forth, waiting to submit it. And so my guess is that that number of 233 will mostly go away before we roll into February and get them out the door, so they don't worry about it. To our land surveyors that watch or that listen, obviously they'll go to verify.tn.gov, see that their license is active way before they get it, and they've got peace of mind. But in reality, if they're going to core.tn.gov and renewing and submitting everything, it's a matter of not having enough time and manpower to really get it out the door. But we've got all hands on deck for this program, 4 people pulling them in and touching them. But with Jamie as the expert, I also don't want everybody emailing, because then they're going to come in through all avenues. We want her to be that central point. So I think it's going well compared to 2 years ago. But it brings me to, our next step of us talking about how do we want to look at the renewal for 2019, since we're here and we're living it. And if the board will, I do have suggestions. Sarah and I have had the conversation. I think this is an ideal program to look at treating continuing education a little bit differently than what we have, because they have the ability to submit hours for meetings, hours for seminars they attend, a lot of that flexibility. Our heavy lifting manpower hours are in auditing that continuing education piece. Pardon. No matter what they submit, we have to look at it, we have to count it, we have to plug it in, enter it in 2 places. We developed technology so that we could carry the hours from the previous year and forwards and backwards, and thought it worked, and it didn't. So we're back to kind of a manual process, unfortunately. So with that in mind, I'd like us to discuss using something similar to what the architects and engineers use, what accountants use, which is an audit piece for the continuing education. We would be thrilled, and the statute would let us do that. That means that when land surveyors renew in 2019, and by then the rule will be cleaned up, obviously, that says you have to pay, you have to do continuing education. So once that's in one piece, no one should be confused as to, as long as I do continuing education, I'm okay. Both pieces will be in one part of the rule. But separately from that, when we do the renewal, it is up to them to have met the requirements. They will testify that they have done it, but they do not need to report it unless they're being audited. So the programs that I mentioned do a random audit based on who's renewed, and the system, whether it's an Access database or an Excel database, randomly selects whatever the percentage. 5% is what we use for architects and engineers. Accountants, I think, use 10. Whatever the system kicks out is a random sample, and we mail letters saying you have been selected to provide proof of your continuing education. And they do so in writing. We enter those documents. We literally save them on their license. Anyone that hasn't been selected this round, again, has testified, attested that they did it. And if we find otherwise, that becomes a complaint.
I was wondering when this point would come about, because quite honestly, most states, I'm licensed in 7. Tennessee's the only one of the 7 that I'm licensed in that requires me to submit each individual education hour. All the rest are exactly the way you're proposing right there. It's basically on an honor system. You attest to it in your application, and then randomly get audited. I've been selected randomly from another state to be audited twice, as a matter of fact. No problems, fortunately. So I kind of wondered when we were going to get to this point. I've had several other surveyors in this state make the same point to me that are licensed in other states. They're accustomed to the standard honor system / auditing as well, and wondered, why is Tennessee different? And I said, I'm not really sure. And it kind of goes down this line as I see it. We talk a lot about being professionals, engineering professionals, architectural professionals, and a lot of being a professional goes to the credit and integrity of that licensure that you hold. And part of that is that when you agree to be that professional that you are, that you will, obligate yourself to being honest and straightforward and ethically correct, that you are taking the required PDHs that are required of you, and in return, the regulatory board takes that honor system and trust with you, with a slight auditing on the side. kind of a trust but verify system we've
Yeah.
all heard
Yeah.
of before. And quite honestly, I agree with that. I mean, that goes along with the responsibility of being a professional, that ethically, and you're covering your bases of what you say you're doing. And to some extent, the auditing system will, on a random basis, weed out some of those that are not. So on the face of it, the way you're proposing it, I'm not making assumptions here, but I think it would probably run similar, if not the same, as these other states, for the most part, do. I'm sure there's others that do it the way Tennessee does right now, but I'm not aware of them, quite honestly. And I think also, in terms of manpower and work effort on staff's behalf, probably somewhat inundated, certainly before we went more automated, but I mean, I imagine at the end of the renewal year, you were overwhelmed, especially Donna back in her time, with paperwork on stacks from every licensee for the renewal process.
The plus to that is it didn't all come in paper because we're pretty much paperless, but it still electronically came in, and Jamie will probably agree. Many, maybe half or less, still emailed it instead of adding it
Sure.
to the site. So we had a little bit of everything. But yeah, at the end of the day, it was very little different, just not significant of a change. And we really tried our best to make it be different. But yeah, unless we do something like this, I don't think we'll feel that. And by far, most of our licensees still waited till that week right at Christmas to finish up. So.
Your thoughts?
I agree. I think it's I know that's the way we do it in Kentucky, and it's needed. I think it'll help you guys a whole lot as much as it will benefit the surveyors too, because like you said, I know she was just overwhelmed.
And I think some of the reason maybe why we didn't jump into this renewal cycle, when we talked about it last time, we kept saying, we've got the system, they're going to be able to do it online, it's going to be so much smoother, and we were almost here on the renewal to make a drastic change. And yes, the board had, Donna, we had few staff then, we have even fewer now, simply because we have 16 programs as opposed to one. So the staff kind of moves around and takes care of those things. But at the end of the day, when you have a person like Jamie that's dedicated to this, it's great if it's done throughout a 4-month period, but the reality is it isn't. It's still at the end. And if it's not needed, and we've got the flexibility in the statute, if the board's okay, we will move to start making the changes now so that everyone, through TAPS meetings, so that we inform all of our land surveyors. It's not that you don't have to keep up with it. It's not that you don't have to have the content, the information. All of that's still there. We're just going to send letters to do the audit.
And we can actually do that, like the email you got yesterday, we can do an e-notify that would go out to everybody that signed up that says, this is how we're doing it for renewal cycle 2019.
I'm gonna ask you a question as to whether it's really in the rules and statutes that we can make this. I'm gonna call it drastic. That might be a drastic term to use, but so I'm gonna ask you that in a minute. But first, I want to hear Tim's thoughts on this. I hear him kind of stewing over here. I'm kind of curious to hear what he's gonna go.
The bad guy speaketh. Couple questions. One's on the heel of what Jay said, but I'm going to ask another question first. All right. Miss Sarah, let's make an assumption that the proposal Miss Roxanne has just spoke to is in place. Now, the reason I address this to you is relative to a prospective complaint on respondent A. Okay. In that, I don't know what your current process is, and your current process may take care of my question. So again, let's go back. Let's assume that Roxanne's proposal is good. We're good to go. Now you have a complaint on respondent A. In that complaint, when it's reviewed, and let's assume that respondent A has done something wrong, is the legal department going to verify that respondent A has his or her continuing education and they are up to speed? And let's say respondent A has not been audited. Is that going to be verified so that, can you see where I'm coming from? To make sure that this person, this individual is let's say it that way.
I'm actually going to let Roxana answer because her other boards do this. So they have a system in place already.
So we will likely follow the other boards that are in this, which is if a complaint is open against you, you weren't audited, but there's a complaint. Part of that process includes you showing proof that you have done your continuing education in the last 2 years.
So it triggers.
It triggers that,
It
because
triggers
then
audit.
that's obviously, there's more than just that complaint going on, or that's part of it. And so that can fall right in line. Continuing education is part of you responding to this complaint.
And I would also go back to, if you look at the current legal reports that are done, they do make note if they're exempt from continuing education in the top where they do that. So
Right.
that would probably just be something that Carol would automatically look at when she's typing these up. If they're not exempt, then that's when we would say, can you prove to us in the last renewal cycle that you completed your continuing education?
And I just hope that the exemptions are looked at properly. I'll just make that statement in general. Because, I looked at our licensees, and prior to October, we had 253 licensees that were over 65 years old. But not all of those licensees met the criteria to be exempt from continuing education because they did not have the 25 years of continuous licensure.
That's right.
So that's the reason I make that statement. So
when they
you can be
renewed-
one, but not the other.
Right. When they renewed online, the question, and you all renewed, it popped up, you can take this exemption from, and you still have to do the 2-hour credits and so forth. So when they take that exemption, it flags Jamie, and she's looking at the history. So they no longer have to do the form, so that's the great thing. But by checking the box, it flags us to look at, do they meet both sides of this? So, right. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. Go on. Yeah, continue.
I'm sorry, I just had one more thing.
Go ahead.
You know me. I apologize,
jumped
Mr. Chairman.
in. I jumped in.
Well, the second thing was, and Jay touched on it, was I think that this change cries out for a modification of our current continuing education that we just got approved a couple of years ago, in order to manage this particular process. Now, you may agree or disagree, but I think that it does.
Just by doing just a quick review of the statutes and rules, the statutes give you all free reign to set the requirements for continuing education. That's all they speak to in the statute. So this isn't even a statutory issue whatsoever. The rules that we have under basic requirements just say every licensee is required to obtain. So there's nothing in here that says you have to provide satisfactory proof of completion, as some of my other boards state under their CE rules. So with that being said, unless I find that in here while I'm buzzing through really quick, this change may not even affect our rules. Although drastic, it may not even require us to go through and do any change.
I'm certainly not on a witch hunt trying to find something else for
No,
you
absolutely.
to do, clearly.
But I mean, it's good that you are, because we
Yeah.
need to look at
Right,
all of
right.
these things. But the fact that it doesn't say that you have to provide a certificate of successful completion gives us this leeway to kind of go about this.
So
thing.
basically, it's just a change in the reporting method.
It's an
Instead of-
administrative change. Period.
That's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Do you foresee any change in carryover PDHs? Is that affected at all here?
Not at all. I mean,
wouldn't
that
either.
would not change. When you're audited, you're still going to be able to prove, oh, I carried this over, or you just need to prove the 30 hours.
Is the failure of audit automatic board complaint?
I would say our internal procedure would be the failure of an audit is an automatic administrative complaint that
Would
we're
it-
opening, and it's a violation because you didn't complete what was due for renewal.
Okay, let's go down that path just a minute, Miss Sarah. Let's assume that Surveyor A is audited. Okay, let's assume that we have just renewed December 31st for 2017. Okay, and by technology, the audit pops up for Surveyor A in August of 2018. Okay. Surveyor A does not have the continuing education. They've paid, but they don't have their continuing education at all. Zero, nothing. They didn't do anything. They just said they'd take a chance. Okay, you find that it's deficient. A complaint's filed, but in my thick head, that person has operated illegally
And that's-
from January to August because
Yeah.
they didn't
They're technically
uphold their
unlicensed.
responsibility for the privilege of being licensed.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it would seem to me that the jeopardy for failure of audit, if it was this egregious, doing nothing, would virtually be automatic suspension until the board could hear the case.
That's
And that-
absolutely my thought on it, and I do want to talk to
I love your neck.
the attorney for accountancy and A&E is the same attorney, and I want to talk to her just to make sure how they handle it in that situation. But in my opinion, it would be automatic suspension. As Robin said, when we do discipline that contains CE, when they hit that 180 days, if they've not completed that CE that we've asked of them, we suspend their license as of that day until they turn it in. So I would say what we would do in this situation is we would probably send them a letter that says, you've been audited. It came back that you don't have, sufficient CE. We have at this point suspended your license. It will go in front of the board. If you can provide that CE credit between now and then, we will reinstate you. But it will still be a complaint because they were obviously operating unlicensed during that period. So it would still come before you all, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they may not be suspended on April 1 and then reinstated on April 15th because they were shy
Right.
2 hours and they
Right.
turned them in.
I understand.
So
I understand.
I do think that that's how we would go forward with this
Right.
process.
Again, I'm not trying to be hard on anybody, but, me, I'm kind of a rule follower. I just want everybody to follow the rules.
And you're probably asking the questions that the people that are live streaming are wanting to know. So,
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, that individual in that example is harming the public. And that's our charge, to protect the public. They're harming the public because they're representing themselves as a professional, and they're doing a work product and taking dollars from John and Jane Q. Public for that work, and when in fact they are not really a licensee. The only problem that I have with Ms. Roxanne's scenario, and it's going to be no matter what the scenario is that we have always had, and you'll have in anything, people that just want to take that risk that I was talking about and do nothing, and maybe I'll get caught, maybe I won't get caught. But that's in everything, and we can't manage that. We can't manage that. But what we can manage is a system that works for the licensee, that is the professional that they signed on to be, as Jay said, when they got their license.
no, that's exactly right. And that's where we also need people in the industry to help us out. If person X didn't do it, there's no issue with somebody calling us and saying, hey, we think you should look at them. And we can audit anyone at any time. Although when we do it, for the renewal, it'll be a random. That doesn't mean that if someone calls us and said, hey, we know everybody at this firm decided this year they were going to take a chance and not do any education, we can go look at that whole firm. So,
Another question, percentage-wise, because our numbers are low, if you use 5%, you're looking at doing 55. Is that a renewal period or each year? That's another question I have.
And that would be, right now, it's per renewal period that we collect the information, right? That doesn't mean that it has to be. If we're really wanting to kind of spread out the workload, we could ask in August, like you picked a month, and my thought is, well, in August, are we auditing what they did prior to December 31st of the last period? Because in many of the land surveyors' minds, they only have to do them before they expire. And so with that in mind, it would be probably whenever we audit you, you're submitting it for the previous renewal.
Absolutely.
And that would just have to be very clear in the letter.
Well,
so then we can still audit in April and May and June and not have to get them done. But if there's only 55 or 100 letters that need to go out, I think it's much easier to go ahead and do the audit in February or March for the previous renewal cycle and just have it done. Everybody that was picked is done. That's how I would prefer it. Gives everybody time, gets us over the busy season, and then here's the audit for the previous renewal cycle, and that's that.
What I was looking at too was not necessarily increasing the numbers, because that gets us back to where we're at today, and that's not the purpose. But whether or not in the odd year, whether or not there would be any audit. In other words, not just within that biennial period of 2 years, which we're in right now, 18 and 19 is a window, okay? What I'm saying is, if you looked at some in 18, could we not look at some in 19 from a standpoint that it's going to be, numbers-wise, it's going to be 8 to 10 years before anybody gets hit anyway. Potentially, I mean, if you go through everybody, unless you pick somebody twice.
So
And you could.
just to make sure we're clear, so if we were doing it for, so let's say next week Jamie was going to look at 10% for the random audit, and she would be looking at the last renewals to make
Correct.
sure that they
Correct.
have
Fall
it.
back.
Correct.
So if we did it in the odd years, so next year at this time, you would want her to pick like 5% from that same period, just to, that way you're catching.
But she's still looking at the same.
Same period.
Still the same cycle.
Annual
Same.
audit,
Yeah.
the
So
biannual
you would-
renewal, but an
And what I was looking at,
So that way you wouldn't have to do 15% immediately after, but you could technically cover 15 to 20%.
and what I was looking at was staff workload for Jamie. I mean, that way, if we pick, if you all determine, I shouldn't say pick or determine whatever, some magical percentage, then, once she just got off of this roller coaster, she now hits a new one. And then that also triggers potentially a lot of extra work for Sarah if she happens to hit some that are not good, so that she's not bombarded type thing. I mean, that's all I was looking at was from a workflow
Distribution.
situation. You may want to think about that,
Right.
as well.
I think with the numbers being relatively low, getting the letter out and following up wouldn't, if we're looking at doing it in March or April, drastically, because by then we're over the hurdle of the renewals. So if the board, and it sounds like you're all in agreement, and we can obviously keep at, look at different options or ask around, but if you're all in agreement, we will start moving toward that, do an analysis, make sure that we send an email notification. I think people can start preparing. We've got plenty of time, but definitely moving in that direction for the next renewal cycle.
So the idea is to put this into effect for the 2019, and the auditing would start after that.
Correct.
After that.
So 2 years from now, roughly, right, when we roll into February or March, and you all, I have no problem with us then drafting a letter, making sure you're comfortable with it. The letter can even say, not providing it, open, complaint, just list it all. And again, we've got programs that are doing it, coming up with that magical number. It may be 10% because 5's too low, whatever it may be. So that's the one, I think, biggest piece of this. The other piece that we did talk about prior to the renewal cycle opening up is changing the possibility and staggering the renewal of individuals. So if we're looking at the 1,133 number we had, everyone expired at the same time. I think this does. I think the CE that completely takes care of it, because the only other recommendation I would make is to leave alone those land surveyors already licensed with the cycle that ends in December, and maybe our new land surveyors come in, and as they come in, they get a 2-year cycle. Again, those numbers are small, so it isn't like we bring in 200, 300, 400 a year. That could really help. I think the C is the biggest piece, but if the board also wants to address changing the date on your folks, the technology could be there too. If you got your license after June of 2018, your 2 years is every 2 years, but it's a different cycle. But if, again, that impact would be small compared to what we will hit by doing the continuing education change.
I think this scenario deserves a run-through before we would potentially go to that.
Perfect. I agree.
Would you think that'd be okay?
Oh, yeah, I agree. Like I said, if we had 200, 300 each year
Yeah.
that came on board, it may be worth doing that.
Right.
But right now, I think this would solve that area without any doubt. And then on the renewal thing that I want us to last talk about, because we've got a licensee that I definitely want to appreciate his time being here and let you all speak to him. But while we're on this, the last piece of the renewal to consider is, what do we do, if anything, for those licenses that as of February 1st, in essence, shouldn't be practicing anymore? Both items haven't been met. There's a penalty each month that's added. The board had discussed, how do we send them a reminder of the renewal? What do we do? So that's what I want us to talk about. We have the technology to be able to run a report come February 2nd, let's say Friday, and see of this 107, or by then those that haven't sent Jamie all their continuing education, now it becomes 203. Of those 203, and I believe we literally, when we sent the notify for the December 14th report, we had, what, 2 maybe without an email address? I mean, it was less than 5. It was, and we sent them letters, and they actually responded immediately because the emails didn't go out. So they were the ones we got a hold of. So through email notification, we can do the same. This is a courtesy email. You were mailed in September, your renewal. We realize you haven't renewed. And so this is a reminder. If you're not practicing, you don't want to renew, no reason to contact us, but this is to let you know that as of now, your license shows expired. Provide a link to verify and let them know in hopes to reach them. Because what I don't want us to do is have a list that we can pick and choose from and decide who to follow up on and not. We have to give everybody that equal chance to remember that your license expired and do you want to renew. So we can definitely do that. Now, I know a couple other programs mail actually the renewal letter one more time. If the board prefers the mail, I think at that point, it's not a huge, cumbersome event. We can do it. We can get 200 letters out versus email.
My initial thought on that is at that point, because this is the point where the license becomes suspended, essentially. I personally warrant a letter, a physical. Call me old school if you want. I don't know. Am I getting to that point? Am I getting to old school? Wow.
I mean,
That happened.
attorneys get a physical letter, so.
Thank you. Yeah. Myself, when you get something physical, letter, I'm not saying any more or less important than an email, but it's tangible. It's in your hands. It gets your attention, I guess, a little bit more as opposed to a click, click, click down the list. So I definitely would suggest a hard copy letter to each of the people that are on that list. But at the same time, I also suggest an email. I have no problem with duplication as opposed to relying on only email. I imagine the email system, technology-wise, is a little bit easier as opposed to the manpower required for individual letters. But I would definitely suggest a hard copy, but I would also follow it up with an email as well.
And the body of the letter should state your license are suspended from this date forward.
It will say, as of February
Yeah.
1st, 2018, your license is now in an expired status.
Yes.
If this is an error, please contact us immediately. If you're okay with this, that's
but there
fine.
should be some kind of warning
But you cannot be practicing
not
land
to be
surveying.
practicing.
Yeah.
It cannot say it's suspended because it's not. It can say you didn't renew and you are. It's an expired license.
Expired, excuse
If you intend to renew or are working, this is what you need to do. We can cite the statute. So the only drawback from what we just went through is individuals sometimes skim at the top of an email and respond and react and don't get to the full body. And maybe in paper it's better. But the full body on this last email said, if you have done any of this, please disregard this. Don't.
Right.
Because what happened is we had probably over 200 calls. The issue with that is we're 26 programs and a customer service base that it can paralyze us. So the statute doesn't require us to do this. It would be a courtesy to do it and start in that realm. The office is going to mail the letters, email, and all that. But we also can't then receive, emails and letters from 150 individuals upset that I don't want to practice anymore. Why are you sending me reminders? Or I mailed it yesterday, because that's that fine line of do we have the manpower to handle all this feedback?
For one of my programs, I think we kind of put a statement in there that said, please do not reach out to us if you're, trying
You read
to do
this
X,
email.
Y.
The email said, if you've already done something,
Yeah.
ignore this.
Because we
and they
we
did.
sent something out like this for Trek, and
Yeah.
so we had to come at it in that direction too, because there's a lot of real estate agents out there.
So I am fine with that. The board has no problem, and I'll volunteer our time to send 200, however many are pending, come February 2nd, which is a Friday. We'll run reports, we'll mail letters, we'll do the email. Sarah will proof it like she did the last email. We will add the statement. If you already have paid online or mailed it in, please disregard because otherwise we really can't help those individuals that are wanting to make it right. We will move forward. Hopefully folks don't have spare time to get on, mass media and publish that we aren't doing what we need to do. But the reality is this is a courtesy that, we've already mailed the original thing. So I'm happy with us doing this and hopefully avoiding some folks later down the road having the complaint and trying to renew and so forth.
Roxanne, I hope you don't take where I'm going wrong here. It's the applicant's responsibility. When you boil down to it, or
Couldn't agree more.
registrants, I should say, the registrants, it really is. It is their responsibility. Back to the definition of professional. For that renewal. I really look at this as just like you said, it is a courtesy, if you want to say notification or reminder, however you want to phrase it. It really is a courtesy. But I think it is a courtesy that this board should extend to these registrant 200 plus odd that just either have chosen not to or neglected to or forgot to or for whatever reason. There's a multitude of reasons of why they just haven't been able to get to that point. So I really think that we need to take it upon us as the board to extend out to them, again, just as a courtesy. I think it doesn't hurt a thing.
It doesn't. It doesn't. If it delays us some, so be it. So I think it's well worth doing both, as the board has suggested. In April, we'll update you of the numbers, and hopefully those that are pending, are no longer practicing and meant to let it go expired. So that is the last piece that I have on the renewal. We have really made, I think, huge decisions on what to do for 2019, as well as hopefully helping those folks that forgot that they expired. So at this point, if we want to continue, I do want to take advantage of, on your iPads, you have, I believe, the letter from Mr. Kimbrough, and if you give me a minute.
Yeah, do we need to take action on?
Roxanne, real quick, I
Yes.
mean to cut you off either.
Sure.
Tim wants to jump in here on one point,
Okay.
and then also addressing Mr. Kimbrough. I know you've been real patient with us. What I'd like to do is just kind of listen up to Tim, make some comments there, and then probably take like a 10-minute break.
Okay,
Then when we
perfect.
come back, we can address
Perfect.
Mr. Kimbrough. Be glad to. Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Okay, Jay, you very aptly said 6218-113, which our licensees should be very well aware of their responsibility, as far as last year. What I wanted to address to Miss Sarah was, just waiting. Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to address to Miss Sarah was something that I have addressed before to this board, and we haven't gone anywhere with it yet. Because of the scenario we just painted, I have never been in favor of 6218-114 paragraph C, which allows for the 1 year late renewal period of a penalty of $20 per month. I have never been in favor of that, and I'm licensed in 5 states, and the other 4 states I'm licensed in do not have that in that format any whatsoever. They basically have a window that's sort of what I call a drop dead window with a fine, and it's perform or you're not, basically.
So it would be like a 30-day grace period.
Yes.
If you don't renew
Yes.
by February 1st of that year, you're done.
And if you renew late, your fine is, and in this case, this fine could be $240.
Right.
So I would think and I know how the legislature is about fines, so forth and so on, about changing numbers. I don't want to change any numbers.
Right.
It's my mind that we that we could propose to change the window and take this number, this magic 240, that I feel like could be the maximum fine, and come up with a number that, let's say it was $200, for example. Let's say it was 30 days and $200. And we change that paragraph to go to that. And then in my limited mind, it doesn't put Miss Roxanne and the staff in this drag-out mode. Because I'm just like Jay. If you have a surveyor's license, then you're supposed to be a professional. And that license has responsibilities. And one of those responsibilities is making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do to maintain your license, along with protecting the public, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like that this is one of our older statutes that I think 98 was the last time it was even touched. So I know it's 20 years old, and it was written in 69. So, I know it's got plenty of vintage to it. So at the end of the day, I think it's time that if we're going to make these other modifications, I think it's time that we reach out and grab this and run it through the process that you have to take it through and get that modified. And then I feel like for the licensee, it creates a much cleaner and clearer path that they understand that they can't drag it on. Because I remember when Donna was here, she had 2 or 3 individuals every renewal period that would wait, for whatever reason, they would wait until November or December in that grace year before they would ever renew and pay the extra fee. You know, why,
So
I don't know.
I will tell you, I will make a note of this. This is something that we would have to do through legislative proposal next session. I will go ahead and give you the fair warning that this is not the only program that has a 1-year reinstatement period. So that's going to be our obstacle. Appraisers has a 1-year reinstatement period. Real estate has a 1-year reinstatement period. And those are just my programs that I know of. So we're not the only board dealing with this. I probably answer 5 emails a week from real estate agents in this reinstatement period, and they're paying far more than $25 a month to reinstate. So we will have a hurdle getting through the legislator of why we want to shorten this time for someone who has taken an exam and worked hard, and they may have just had a life event that they were unable to renew because of. And that's probably what our hurdle will be. I don't have a problem with the proposal and putting it up next year, but I just want to give you the fair warning that there's.
Oh,
there could
everybody's
be-
always got a problem with something,
there
and I
can be
understand.
pushback. So-
And you know, I would yield to Ms. Roxanne from the standpoint of how the architects, engineers do it. It may be the same, I don't know, but you know, obviously we are able to kind of tag along as a lookalike on a lot of these legislative things. If they do it, you know, way A, we can do it way A too.
Right.
Even though we've been doing it way C or whatever. So obviously that's something that we could do. And if you could look into that, that may be a plus.
Yeah. And I'll go
you
back
know.
and double check on the statute because it actually was changed with the 2001 legislation. So I don't know what changes were made.
But I'm in the blue book, so mine would have been old.
Perfect. So I'll go
And I
back.
keep this blue book because of Mr. Northcutt.
I will go back and take a look at that.
Okay. I think we'll go ahead and take a recess here, 10, 15 minutes, something like that. That'll work?
Thank you.
Do you?
We're all set. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Roxanne. Okay, we're back here after a brief break there. I appreciate your patience with me. And we were talking on the topic of licensure renewals.
Correct. Thank you. And I think, and I've confirmed with Sarah, that we don't officially need any type of motion to make some of these changes because they're administrative changes. So we will proceed with the game plan as we've covered. I think if all of the questions have been answered, we've got a game plan. Sarah has some things she'll look at to see about the next legislative change, as Mr. Lingerfeld brought up, maybe looking at this statute 62-18-114. We now would like to, on your iPads, bring before you one of our land surveyors, Mr. Jeff Kimbrough. He falls in line, and the last thing we discussed is that expiration period, that 1-year time to renew, then what happens when you become expired. And so you have before you his letter. If the board hasn't had a chance to review it, I will definitely give you some time. And then he did want to appear before you to answer any questions you have so we can make a decision. We also handed in paper one other letter that was handed to us today. Mr. Bobby Moore, the situation is almost identical. So what I'd like us to do is address Mr. Kimbrough's request and kind of go from that. They will probably be the same response to both, and we'll answer any questions. Thank you.
And I'll go ahead and give my little legal blurb here. Under 62-18-114C that we just discussed, both of the registrants that will be before you, Mr. Kimbrough and Mr. Moore, have been expired for over a year. So they are at that period where they will have to reapply. You do, in your discretion, have the authority to waive any further examination of these applicants. So just so you have that in your heads going forward.
Excellent. Mr. Kimbrough, welcome. I certainly appreciate your patience with us this morning. I certainly appreciate your attendance with us. And, of course, I appreciate your letter that you've sent into the board. And we want to afford you all the opportunity and time and allow you to explain exactly where you're coming from, where you want to go. And I imagine we'll probably have a few questions for you. I definitely want to make sure that you feel at ease. I know it can be kind of a little stressful situation coming in front of a board like this before. I understand that. Just take a deep breath. We're all surveyors here. We're all just like yourselves. So feel at ease. Go ahead and begin with what you'd like to address today.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Chairman Kaufman, and I do come before you today to follow up on the letter that I wrote to you, and to seek your guidance, as to what to do. I believe that throughout the years since being licensed in '94 and coming forward, I've kept up with all my continuing education requirements and all my renewal requirements until this point. I just received an email notification on the 16th of January this year that my license had been expired, actually December 31st, 2015. And I do agree with all of you completely that it is my responsibility. The responsibility completely lies with me, and I'm not hiding from that. I've like I mentioned to you a while ago, I've learned a lot going through this process just since January 16th of this year, in some things that I'm definitely going to institute going forward. I understand that the renewal fee itself is actually a part, of the continuing education and the renewal of our license. I'd always viewed the continuing education requirements themselves and complying with those and adhering to those as being the most important part of that. It's not to say that I didn't purposely not pay that fee. I think it was overlooked for whatever reason, and I didn't do that purposely, never have, and never would. Again, I just come before you to ask for your direction and how to proceed and become licensed again. That's what I want to do.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, the license that you hold expired December 31st of 2015. Yes, sir. Okay, and it is your desire to basically renew your license to a current status. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, absolutely.
Completely.
Okay. I trust that you've had the opportunity to read through some of the statutes as they are. Any questions related directly with that, specifically probably into 6218.114, which we've addressed here already to some point. Of course, 113, puts the onus of the registration and renewals upon the licensee themselves, and I heard you say that you completely understand that and comply with it. I understand that.
Yes, sir.
But is there any other questions in there that you have for us?
No, sir.
Okay.
I tell you what, the ladies, Miss Jamie and Miss Roxanne, they have been great. Like I said, I've learned a lot, especially from them since the 16th of this month, and pointing me in the right direction and answering all my questions plus some. So no, they've been great.
Part of the process, as I understand it, and is detailed out in here, is obviously there may be some fines involved. Renewal of the licensure, as it's explained in there, does set a path for having to take reapplication and reexamination. It's my understanding, as I read through this, the only part that this board has discretion on is the reexamination itself. So the other parts are pretty much outlined step by step. There's really not a whole lot that we can do there. However, this board does have the purview to discuss and to waive the re-examination requirements. Is that what you're basically asking the board to do here?
Yes, sir. I began the process of completing the application. I have everything in order except for a reference, and I didn't actually bring my drawings and the descriptions with me. That's what I like, completing the application. I realize there are dates and deadlines for that as well, and adhering to those dates and deadlines, creates further hardship for me not being able to work. But, whatever it is and whatever y'all see necessary is what I'll do.
Obviously, we want to get you up to speed. We want to do this as quickly as we can to get you back into proper licensure status. So we're going to do what we can to help you out with that. Okay.
Right.
Let me ask you a question here on your PDHs though. Are you currently up to date with PDHs, or do you think you'll require additional PDHs?
No, sir. I'm up to date.
You're up to date with PDHs.
Yes, sir.
So you can provide the paperwork associated with all that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good to hear.
I have that with me.
Has that been provided already? Yeah.
You certainly can provide that, obviously.
Yeah.
He's
Yes.
been working very closely with Jamie, so
Great.
they've
Yes, Mr. Kimbrough, again, I wear the bad guy role, so I just want to say a couple of things to you. And I know you've already beat yourself up worse than anything that I could say or anybody else here in this room could say to you. Probably the most important consideration that I would say to you is this. During this period of time when you thought you were licensed and you were practicing appropriately, it's important that you be aware that there looms a situation to where, let's say you did a survey sometime last year and the adjoining party disagreed with your survey. There looms a scenario that if you were called into court, that because of this situation, the opposition's attorney, one of his questions he would ask you is, are you a licensed surveyor? And if so, how long have you been licensed, and is your license current? Well, by him doing some due diligence, he would find out that that may not be the case. So that's just simply a sort of a board caution and courtesy to you to let you be aware of that. And equally so, I don't know if you have clients that you may need to respectfully notify of that situation. All of those are business practices that you, your company, and so forth would have to make. And I just feel like that from my position here on the board that it's appropriate that those things be said to you so you'll be aware of those as if you're probably not already aware of them. But I felt like it was important that be said.
Yes, sir, and I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Lingerfeld, and I understand that completely, and I intend to take those actions.
And I would just jump in to say, in the situations that you're describing, if you were to be sued, in almost every situation where this has happened, we at the department receive a subpoena. Roxana's typically subpoenaed as the director. I've been in situations with other boards where our director's been subpoenaed. Somebody's had an expired license. They've since reinstated. So we will know about those situations, and this board will be apprised of those if any come up for you, which I hope none do.
I do as well. Hope none do.
Mr. Kimbrough, just a follow-up question. Maybe the staff can answer it as well. Have you ever been the subject of disciplinary action in front of the board at all in your time of license?
No, sir.
Okay, that's good.
I might ask Ms. Roxanne at this point, if the board saw favor in Mr. Kimbrough's request, what would be his, other than making the application for board approval, what would be his cost as far as would he still be obligated for the 1 year of late fees?
Oh, so based
or
on,
could the board assess those?
the board, I think, could. Sarah will think about it as I answer. Based on the reapplication process, the total fee is $300 for him to reapply, submit the reference. He's current on his CE, so he'll submit those as well. And that's, the $200 is the basic application and the $100 for the certificate, the wall. And I guess we could waive that if the board decided to, but that total application fee is $300. So he would be paying the same fee as anybody coming past. The board would have to make a motion to waive these exams if that's the case, and if you require additional continuing education, but he really wouldn't have to get caught up on the renewal. That is kind of come and gone. So I believe the way the statute is written is with the intent of you missed that opportunity, now you reapply and come back in, and that's where the exams play. So you don't really get caught up on the renewal anymore.
From a reading of the statute, he would not be assessed those penalties. I can tell you my other programs that have this exact same, it typically says, where yours says any person whose registration has been expired for more than 1 year shall make application for registration. Typically where the other programs, their statute gives them authority, it says shall make application for registration and pay any penalty fees assessed. So since it does not say that, I would make the argument probably in Mr. Kimbrough's favor that at this time he would just reapply, pay the application fee at that point, and then if you all waive the examination, go from that point.
Bro, do you hold licensure in any other field, professional licensure of any other kind by a regulatory board of any kind?
No, sir.
Surveying is the only one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how long have you been licensed?
94.
Since 94?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I assume surveying is your primary business?
Yes, sir, it is.
And I think it's fair to say that since 94, becoming licensed, you've been practicing ever since? No, didn't hold back any? You've been maintaining business practices, producing surveys and all that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, may I make?
Certainly.
I would like to make a motion to not require Mr. Kimbrough to take our examination, to accept and review his application, to assess a fine of $500 in and above the application fee, and upon completion, license Mr. Kimbrough, with the understanding that Mr. Kimbrough is not to practice professionally until that is done.
All right, there is a motion on the floor. I need a second to make discussion with it.
I'll second, and then open for discussion. Can we, I thought, I just understood her to say that the fines were not, we couldn't access a fine.
Well, it's my purview, Miss Sarah, and you correct me, it's my purview that after the 1-year grace period, he is practicing as an unlicensed surveyor, which allows us to go into the civil penalties.
So here's how I'm going to ask that you do this. I'm going to ask that you keep the exact same motion you have, except at this point not assessing a civil penalty, but requesting that the board office open an administrative complaint. We will present this to you at the April meeting, and at that point you can assess a penalty for the unlicensed activity during that period of time.
And that complaint, of course, becomes part of his disciplinary history as opposed to a civil penalty on an application.
Because for us to do the consent order with the civil penalty,
Same thing, yeah, same thing.
It has to come through a complaint. It has to go through the complaint process.
That's fine. That's fine.
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend my motion to what Ms. Sarah has said, and I think we need to vote, second and vote on the amendment by Robert's Rules of Order.
Yes.
I would second the amendment.
Okay, so
Now we need to vote on the amendment first.
yes. Okay, so amended as such, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that amendment? All right, hearing none by voice vote. Those in favor of the amended motion,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the amendment is accepted. Back to the original motion as amended.
Right.
Accepting the idea of waiving the examination requirement. Sarah, do you have these bullet pointed by chance that you could review them for me?
I had that he was, I think Roxana has them, so I'll let her.
Yes. I think the motion is that he would be permitted to have the exams waived, so he would not be need to reapply and have the application process, once completed, reviewed by the office so that we can actually then license him. And that is really the way the motion stands. Separately, I believe, based on the conversation, administration is required to open a complaint, and that will live its course and come back to you
Okay.
for assessment.
Excellent. Okay. All right. With that, there is a motion and a second on the floor of the amended motion.
Right.
Any further discussion on that? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay.
And before you leave, Mr. Kimbrough, I would like to say this. The penalty is no way personally directed towards you. I find that this board must maintain a level of consistency, whether it be you or someone else from any other part of the state. And I feel like that's an appropriate action for this board to maintain that level of consistency.
I don't disagree.
And I personally want to thank you, as the chair did, for coming today, presenting your case very respectfully and very professionally. And I know I've never followed your work, but I've got a pretty good idea that you're the kind of guy we want licensed.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Kimber, real quick before we let you go here, I know you're anxious to get out. I just want to say thank you. You did this the right way, okay? And what I appreciate the most and what I respect the most is that you accepted the responsibility for it. You had great communication with the staff. Obviously, when you were alerted to it, you didn't put it off, you didn't delay, you didn't try to find excuses. You accepted the personal responsibility. I appreciate that.
I thank y'all for your time.
Great. Thank you for coming out. Jackie, any comments? You good? All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank y'all.
Now, we handed out the letter from Mr. Moore. He is also still here. I don't know if we want to go through the same motions or if the board wants to automatically extend the same courtesy. I'll let you guide me.
Certainly. I see that Mr. Moore is present today. I certainly want to afford you the same opportunity. If you'd like to come forward and speak with us, that'd be great. We can handle this completely separate and individually.
As you speak, that red is on.
I'd like to thank the board for accepting our presence and allowing us to speak to them. I'm disappointed that I did lose my license. I've been surveying all of my adult life in various capacities, and I believe that I am well qualified to be a surveyor, and I do want to do what's correct and in accordance with the law and the wishes of the board. And I thank you for the opportunity to address you and ask for your help as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Well, real quick before you sit down.
Yes,
before
sir.
You sit down, just real quick. Is it your desire that that this board address your situation today and make a ruling on it?
Yes, sir. I would like to facilitate the process.
Okay, excellent. Okay, as such, obviously I want to ask you a couple of questions similar to what I asked Mr. Kimbrough. How long have you been licensed, or when was your original licensure for surveying issued?
I surveyed on a PE license till the board decided that PEs couldn't certify surveys. And in 1979, I received notice and did apply and was accepted for license in 1979. And if my arithmetic is correct, that's like 39 years ago.
And I see here in your letter you state that you also hold a professional engineering license as well.
That's correct.
Do you still hold that license?
Yes, sir, since 1969.
Is it current as well?
Sir?
Is that professional engineer's license current?
Yes.
It is. Okay. So you were aware of the renewal process with the engineering license. Staff, is that an annual or biannual renewal on the engineering? Do you know?
It's biannual as well, but
So
throughout
similar-
the whole year. It's not like
got you.
ours is. Right.
Okay, I got you. Okay, so somewhat similar, but a little bit different.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously the idea of renewal of licensure is not something new to you. You've been doing it for, what would you say, 39 plus years surveying wise, plus your engineering license as well. So obviously
Yes.
that's an annual thing for you to handle as far as your licensure renewal. I'm just kind of curious. How did the professional surveyor's license get lapsed here? If it's it's an ongoing thing you've had for the last 40
To the
40
lack
years.
of my knowledge, I was not notified that my licensing was in arrears, and I did not know about it. I still do not know about it. I only heard it through lip service. Yesterday, I did receive an envelope with an application for a land surveyor's license. That's the closest that I have been officially notified that I don't have a license.
But for the last
And I
39 plus years that you have been licensed as a surveyor, you've renewed it every either year or 2 years. I know there was a
Yes,
change
sir.
in there.
I
But
always renew as soon as I'm notified.
was there anything that made you think that over the last 3-4 years, or was it 2-3 years, that there wasn't a requirement for renewal?
No, sir.
Okay.
I just, quite frankly, my memory is fading due to my 39 years as a land surveyor. And I didn't realize that I had not renewed, and I always renew everything as soon as I get noticed. And apparently the mail service failed to deliver my notice.
The last, 3 years, I guess? Is that about right? 2 years? 2 years?
I don't know how often they notify you.
So the notice he's referring to would have been mailed end of October of 2015. That's the only notice that we would have, by statute, had to get out in the mail.
Do you actively have an email address where you receive emails
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know the board has my email or not. I don't know.
Okay.
We'll double check and make sure that we do have that.
Thank you. Yeah. How about your PDHs? Are you current on your surveying PDHs?
Yes,
to this
I
date?
go to the TAPS meeting
You
every
do?
year.
Absolutely. See you there. All right. And obviously,
And,
you can
This
provide.
past year, since I am a senior citizen, I was not required to take anything but the standards and ethics portion of the.
And being that you're, as you put it, a senior citizen, did you make application for that waiver because of your age?
I don't think it required a waiver.
Okay, he did. Okay, so we have an application for a waiver of the PDHs, but what we don't have is an application for the renewal of the license. Do I have that correct? Okay, all right. So obviously you were aware of the renewal period. If you made application for the waiver of the required PDHs, those kind of go hand in hand with the renewal of the license. Unless I'm missing something here. Am I missing something? Okay.
I hate to be confrontational, but I did not receive a notice that my license were not current.
But I'd still make the argument that for the last 39 years as a professional licensed surveyor, you've been annually renewing every year. Is there anything in your mind that would make you think, well, I don't have to do it now?
No, sir.
Okay, that's what I want to hear. All right. Any questions? Any questions? Do you have any issues with the reexamination? And just so I'm clear, it is your desire to get your professional surveyor's license active and up to date?
Yes.
It is your desire. Okay, so you're not looking to lose the license or retire the license or anything like that? No. Okay, obviously. Okay. Is it, and so are you asking the board here to waive the requirement for the examination?
I certainly am.
Okay, all right. Ms. Roxana, in order to get Mr. Moore back up to speed here, obviously he probably have to go through the same process we did with Mr. Kimbrough. Does that include the application? $300, I think, was the total?
That is correct. We want to make sure to be consistent. If the situation and the board agrees with both of them, open and administrative, I would recommend we go down that path if you're considering waiving the exams. That's the hardship imposed right now.
Thank you. One last question, Mr. Moore. Have you ever had a disciplinary action either proposed to the board or an action taken against you?
No, sir.
Okay. That's good. 39 years of doing that without it. That's good to hear. Okay. Any questions? All right. I think we've heard the case from Mr. Moore here and the answers to his questions. If there's a motion to be made, I'll accept it.
I'll make a motion that we waive the examination for Mr. Moore, and he apply through the proper application process, and the board review that to reinstate his license. And during the time as he is now, he's not to practice because he's unlicensed as we speak.
Correct. Okay. Is that it for the motion?
That's for that motion, and then we'll come back.
Might have one to come more.
Yes.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right. Hearing none by voice vote, those in favor of accepting the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So we have that.
I'd like to make another motion that the legal staff open a board complaint that the board can review in April. Same language as we use for Mr. Kimbrough.
All right. Motion on the board here. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second it, and I do have one question on it. In the last 2 years, because I know you're retired, have you actually practiced surveying?
Yes.
Okay.
In that spirit, I would extend the same comments. I know you were present as I spoke with Mr. Kimbrough. I would extend the same comments to you that I spoke to him about.
Okay. So a motion and a second with further discussion. If I hear no further discussion by voice vote, those in favor of accepting the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So we have two motions, two accepted. Mr. Moore, I don't know if this is exactly what you're after, but we're trying to get you your license renewed, and I think we're providing the avenue for you. Obviously, by today's action, we waived the examination requirement, and we look forward to receiving your application.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I appreciate you coming out. Thank you.
Any questions on the application process? Just talk to Jamie. Thank you.
Okay. Roxanne, I think we still had a few items under Director's Report, did we
We
not?
do, and if it's okay, we can, I think, get through most of this before lunch break? Yes. Okay. Next on our agenda items is the NCWS offer to visit Tennessee. I went ahead and included an email. This is something that when we were in Florida on our last, they mentioned, and so we took them up on it, thought it was a good opportunity for the general public to hear how this works. And so they are going to have someone available to come and attend, and they've listed on our website that the president, Paul Tyrell, will be able to be present at our April 12th meeting.
Who did you say?
Paul Tyrell, Tyrell.
It says president.
Northeast Zone
He's
Vice
the
President.
North. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I was going to say, okay.
The president, I'm like, what?
Okay.
Tammy. I was like, bring this Tammy.
Right.
These sessions.
Yeah, it says she's assigned him to come. So
Okay.
that's who's coming.
And so that'll be
That's who
the
will
April
come.
meeting?
April meeting, and anyone that works on our program from our team, I'm going to have also come in and sit in and listen. So as many as we can have. So that is on. They're going to be on our agenda for April. And along those lines, since we're talking about the April meeting, if we can just kind of lump in, the board had agreed that at the April meeting we would have some time with the A&E board. I think historically you all have met, and this will be my first time doing it in this case for both. How do we want to proceed with that? Is it just a couple hours that you all share? Do you have the whole April meeting together?
Furnish boxing gloves to start with. No, I'm not.
Okay.
Typically, it runs anywhere from 30 minutes to
Okay.
2 hours.
Okay.
It just depends on what subject matter we want to reach out and touch on.
Okay.
And usually we just meet with the engineering committee. Usually it's the one we meet with.
Okay, then that's kind of what I was looking for guidance. So that's how we will do it, because they have several subcommittees, if you will, that meet. So we'll include you in those, and then if they too are interested in having the same presentation, we may try to connect that so that it's on the record and everybody can benefit at the same time, and we don't have the individual here longer. So we look forward to that and are thrilled that they're able to do this. So the next item under the director's report is the Southern Zone meeting that is scheduled for April 19th through the 21st. And we want to go ahead and make sure and put on the record who will be attending. That we've got 3 funded delegates, and so at this time, as long as the 3 of you have it on your calendar and can attend, we can proceed with the justification. Let them know. Make sure that you've got time to register. Do anything else for that meeting.
Now, one thing I may say, Ms. Roxanne,
Yes, sir.
is since I'm a Southern Zone officer, I am already funded. So that leaves another position open for our board to go, which would be either you or Ms. Sarah or whomever y'all choose.
Certainly. Be great.
And so we will definitely try to do that. And if either one of us have that, I know I can't on those dates. I think I've got actually a board meeting on those dates with one of the other programs. But I will check with Sarah and make sure, because you mentioned that you're funded through a different section. So that'll be great. If we have a motion then to send all 3 of you, or the 2 that are going with this funded, we'll go ahead and send in the justification memo. So we don't have to do anything at all for you, Mr. Lingerfeld. Is that correct? Okay, fantastic. So we will need a motion to make sure to send the other members, and then if in the next week we can determine if anybody else, either Sarah or I can go, we definitely will go that route.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All right, motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Okay.
I think that covers all the items that are listed there. Is that right?
It does. If you don't mind, before we break, then we have 2 things left, but definitely the new member we can discuss, and then
Absolutely.
depending on if everyone wants a break for lunch, we'll leave the last few items, or we can possibly get them all done and just leave the application process till after lunch, or break before we. What about reviewing the
Maybe
plat
we'll
toward
do
the
break.
end?
We'll do all that afterwards.
Let's go ahead and do the public member.
Perfect.
Get that
Perfect.
information out, and then we'll take a break for lunch.
Fantastic. So we've been waiting on a public member to be appointed, and our website has been updated to include the name for Mr. Jed McKeehan. We were hoping he would be available for today, and unfortunately, there was just not enough notice to get him to be able to be here.
I Googled him.
You did.
I was being nosy this morning because I thought I was meeting with, it was on my calendar to meet with him this morning to go over the new member orientation. So I did Google him, and from what I found, he appears to be an attorney out of Knoxville. So
Be on your toes, all I can tell you.
I know.
We got one of you amongst us now.
I know. All my boards, it seems like I have an attorney on them now that I can get challenged.
So that is exciting, I know, for all of us to have a new member on board. He is going to be able to do the April orientation, so before the meeting in April, he will be able to do his conflict of interest, take care of all of that, and join our meeting, and then it'll be a great opportunity to hear what NCWS has, kind of a full force into this. So yeah, we have our full board at that time, so that'll be exciting. And if anything else changes, we'll let you know. We'll look at the travel arrangements, and that's all I've got then, if we want to leave the other pending items for after lunch.
Okay, sounds good. I certainly look forward to Jed joining us. I think he'll kind of be overwhelmed a little bit. What with we're meeting with the engineers, and right. NCWS will have a representative here. I think he'll be thrown into the fire pretty quick there. Sounds good. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and take a break for lunch. Let's be back here at 1 o'clock. Yep. That sounds good. And when we come back 1 o'clock, we'll probably open up with a TAPS report. So just to let you know. All right.
Thank you.
We're good? Okay. All right. Looks like we're back on camera. We'll go ahead and pick back up with the business at hand for today. We got a few people. We didn't lose too many out there. That's good. We got a few more items left on the agenda today under new business and a couple other items. But before we get to that, I do want to go ahead and extend the invitation to the members that are with us in the audience today. I know there are a couple of them wants to come up and speak in front of us. So they're always welcome, as is anyone. And then also we're going to, after we listen to Mr. Rhodes here, I'm going to give an opportunity for TAPS to give their report as well. So if y'all get your paperwork in line. And Mr. Rhodes, I think you wanted to address the board on some education questions. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I believe you guys have a list of classes and such that I had sent in to Mr. Dillahay.
Can you state your name for the record?
My name is Anthony Rhodes. Sorry.
Hey, real quick, did you get a chance to sign in?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, good.
My biggest question is, will you guys accept that as a way for me to ultimately become licensed?
Real quick, before we jump into that, if you just explain to us real quick, just so it's on the record as well, as to what the institution is and what your intentions are and what it is you're asking us to do.
Sure. The name of this university is the Florida Everglades, University of Florida Everglades. They have a Bachelor's of Science in Surveying and Surveying Management. I would like to pursue that degree, and once I get that degree,
okay, and let's see, I think we have a copy of an email that you had sent in, I think, to Mr. Dillahay. Yeah. You received the email? Okay. And then also we've received a copy of it looks like I assume it's a 4-year syllabus of the
yes,
program
sir.
Itself. Okay.
I believe there should have been an additional PDF attached to that email that went over the individual classes. The classes were kind of buried in there. I went back and forth. Do I pull everything out to the front, and then you've got a document that I've doctored, or do I send you the original document? So that's what I went ahead and erred on, is sending the original.
Is this an online?
Yes, sir.
It is 100% online?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any field aspects involved with any
No,
kind
sir.
of field training, equipment training?
No, sir.
So it's strictly online at your own pace, I assume, type?
Well, the classes are structured. I mean, I can't just go out and take 20 years to finish the degree. You do have to finish it at their pace, so to speak, yes.
How long the program's been
I don't.
established? You don't know. Is it through an actual institution, or is it just strictly an online corporation that offers the degree?
It's through an actual institution, sir.
It is, okay.
It's accredited through I don't remember the exact name of it, but the Southern region, the local Southern accreditation, the same school that Tennessee schools, or accreditation that Tennessee schools are accredited by.
I know the syllabus here has just got handed to us, and obviously there's a criteria of classes that go towards what is accepted and not in terms of coursework that you have to take, regardless if it's a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree plus additional education. And I think they're broken up into categories. Is it ABC or 1, 2, 3? I think it is 1, 2, and 3. Have you yourself had an opportunity to look at the categories and then place them with what's offered through the university?
Yes, sir. That's an actual surveying degree per Florida. So I guess technically it could be Category 1. However, if you don't accept that as an actual survey degree, Category 2 has some rules in there, as I understand, for non-survey degrees, as long as they're a Bachelor of Science. And I believe that actually fits well with Category 2 as well. Category 2, I think, calls for 24 credit hours of surveying classes. That has 27, I want to say, plus I wasn't sure if you'd consider the math classes a survey-type credit, so I didn't include those when I was making accounts. But that's my own opinion, which in the scheme of the world doesn't really matter.
I'll tell you what, it certainly warrants a little bit of a study on our part individually in terms of looking at the classes, and probably want to do a little more research. I know I do myself before I just give you a blanket yes no answer, and I don't expect we're going to have a blanket yes no answer for you today.
I understand.
Because just now it's being presented in front of me, but it looks like a great opportunity for you in terms of trying to get that degree. I applaud you absolutely for pursuing the degree, going that route with it. But I just can't, in today's limited time, I can't afford you an answer. But if you'll allow us some time to review the material and then get back with you,
absolutely,
with
sir.
an answer.
Obviously, if there's anything you need from me, I'm more than willing to send it. I left my email and everything on a sign-in sheet, so I'll definitely take care of that.
Do you have any more questions for us?
No, sir.
Okay, anybody here have questions for Mr. Rhodes?
No, I don't for him, but I do have a question semi-related to this, and it goes back from the time when I've served before. It was unclear then, and I don't know that I've ever heard a clear explanation if so he could a gentleman or a person that say has a bachelor's in civil engineering, he would qualify under the 24-hour additional credit. So, and he made a statement there too a while ago as far as it is the additional hours that's required either under the Category 2 or the Category 3, I think. That's additional hours into whatever their degree.
Above and beyond the degree.
Above and beyond the degree. Is that that's my question.
It says to obtain a bachelor's degree from a science, engineering, or technology curriculum of 4 years or more related to the practice of land surveying, approved by the board with a minimum of 24 hours, semester hours, of board-approved coursework in the surveying sciences.
It's not in addition.
So it's not in addition to that 4-year degree.
That was always a question when I was on before, and that helps me define it going forward. That's all.
I just looked it up online, so you all will be able to find it very easy, and it lays out all the courses that he has to take, so you'll be able to count that up fairly easy than us.
Give us too much credit. Okay, Tim, any questions?
Well, Ms. Sarah is correct, and we had asked, Jackie, I don't know if you remember or not, but we had asked Mr. Messier, who used to do our examination, about the college hours, and the opinion that we got at that time from him was that if it was undergraduate hours or postgraduate hours, it was still college hours. So that falls in line with the spirit of 714 here, Public Chapter 714, where we use for our licensing. So that may be a little different than before for you, but that does fall in line. I will say this, Mr. Rhodes, from just a quick review of the coursework as presented on this email, and as the chair said, we've not had very long to look at it, but I will say this, that my initial cursory review, this particular direction for a BS does not meet the criteria for Category 1.
Okay.
In other words, this program would not be equivalent to East Tennessee State University's program, just to give you a comparison. And that, I think, was probably one of your concerns. I do not see it comparing, and it has some other issues that I'll put a little more time and study to before we indicate any kind of response. I will also tell you this. I have a very close friend who's the chairman of the board of the Florida Land Surveyors, I will contact them and see what their purview is on this particular program, and that will be invaluable information to us to know what their feelings and sense of direction it is. And whatever those findings are, we'll certainly, the chair will probably write you a letter or something, or however we need to handle that to get you the appropriate information.
If the board is comfortable coming through me with any additional questions to send, or, individually let me know if you approve it, I have no problem letting them know, so you don't have to wait till April. If he doesn't mind waiting till April, obviously that's not a problem, but we could possibly get a response before then. Good.
I'll be glad, Ms. Roxanne, to do some research on my part and send you an email and let you know whatever I find.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Does that help?
That helps. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming out, Mr. Rose.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay, all right, moving on. I'm hoping to get a TAPS report here. We've got Mr. Vaughn, Mr. Carter here with us. I think Mr. Cleveland wasn't able to make it today. I appreciate you all stepping in. We're just going to ask you all to step up to the podium, and if you have a written report, read it. If you just want to go off the cuff, that's fine.
I think we've got something on our iPads. Give me just a minute. I'm not mistaken. Number 9, it should be the last document, TAPS report as of January 23rd. Thank you.
My name's Doug Vaught, and I'm the middle director at large for TAPS. And Mr. Cleveland, Jimmy Cleveland, couldn't make it today to give his liaison report to the board for TAPS. So I told him I was coming. So as to not to lose any context, I'm just going to read it off and maybe highlight some points later, and may have a question, another question at the end. But it's dated January 23rd, 2018. Dear Board of Examiners, thank you for the opportunity for TAPS to have a representative to attend these meetings and offer comments and suggestions. Apologize for not being able to attend the meeting in person. As we have discussed previously, there still seems to be confusion amongst the licensed surveyors regarding the rule regarding the requirement for the minimum standards and ethics. The confusion appears to be centered around 2 items. The first being whether the 2 hours of ethics and minimum standards are required every year or every 2 years, and the second being if the hours are to be submitted every calendar year. There's also confusion as to the requirements for ethics and minimum standards as it relates to out-of-state registrants. I personally received several calls about out-of-state minimum standards meeting the requirement. The way the rule reads, some people from other states are under the impression that if they met the requirements in their home state, they are meeting the requirements for Tennessee. TAPS respectfully request that a letter or statement be placed on the Board of Examiners website to explain the rule in layman's terms, along with the specification that the minimum standards must be Tennessee minimum standards.
Can I go ahead and stop you right there?
Sure.
See if we can address these items. I'm seeing basically 2 points of possible confusion there. One being over how often or how many hours in terms of ethics and minimum standards, and whether it's every calendar year or renewal period. And the second one being the requirement of minimum standards as to whether those are for an out-of-state applicant, as to whether those are minimum standards of the state that they are currently from, or if those minimum standards regard to Tennessee minimum standards. I think I can answer that one fairly quickly for you. It is Tennessee minimum standards. So, as a scenario, let's say we have a Mississippi surveyor who is licensed in Tennessee, wants to have his renewal, and is required to have minimum standards included in that. That is Tennessee minimum standards. In addition to whatever minimum standards requirements they have in their own state, we're requiring at 1 hour in Tennessee minimum standards. All right. As far as the ethics go, I know this wasn't a question in the letter, but I've received the same question. The ethics are ethics. We take those, for the most part, universally. I'm speaking collectively. Stop me if anyone disagrees. But the minimum standards are specific to Tennessee. The ethics, pretty much, I think we can all say, are blanket ethics. An ethics course in Mississippi would cover an ethics course in Tennessee. I think we're comfortable with that. Okay. As far as the 2 hours in ethics and minimum standards, I want to make sure, I don't want to go wrong with this, so I want to see how it's written, just to make sure we get it clarified and correctly. Roxana, what's the administratively, what's the understanding on that?
They renew within the 2-year cycle.
Make sure that is the way it is written.
In the continuing education, it states that on a biennial renewal, 30 PDHs are required.
Correct.
A minimum of 2 hours shall be in ethics and standards. 2 of the 30.
So for a renewal period, I call that a 2-year block. You must have taken 1 course with 1 PDH credit in minimum standards, 1 course, 1 PDH in ethics for that 2-year renewal period. That help?
Correct.
Yes, I think Jimmy just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I
that.
understand.
And then to that end, the TAPS is on the local levels giving minimum standards seminar and ethics seminars, so they're out there to be had. At the last board meeting, an inquiry has been made about the possibility of vendors reporting continuing education hours for the attendees as opposed to the individual registrants having to report them. That being said, a lot of this that's in here has already been addressed with prior things, and reading it verbatim, that's just the next paragraph. And what was stated earlier may address that. The TAPS Board of Directors has a question as to the time limit for an audit of a registrant's continuing education hours. For example, the most recent reporting period for PDH hours would be 2015 to 2016. How far back would the board request confirmation of PDH hours? He's got for a registrant. TAPS currently has PDH forms back until at least 2008 or earlier. How long does TAPS need to keep these on file at the office?
I think what he's asking there is TAPS as an organization at the annual conference offers PDH hours to the people that attend those seminars. There's an 8.5 by 11 sheet that the registrant fills out, how many hours he got, signs at the bottom. Pink copy stays, yellow copy goes, and TAPS as an organization maintains those paper files for a period of time. It looks to me like right now the question in front of us is how long does TAPS, the organization, are they required to maintain those records? Does that sound
Correct, yes. I
out
think
of
that's the
question?
meat
Correct, yes,
of
sir.
the paragraph.
I don't know that it's addressed.
The only thing that we address in the continuing education chapter is under sponsors, which is the last item. It says that any sponsor that offers an organized continuing education program for which credit for the program will be requested shall keep a record of attendees at each session and shall furnish the board a copy of the attendees within 30 days of the conclusion of that program. And and we go on here a little bit further. Let's see here. I have a board may conduct random audits section in there. 082005-.13. But it would be my opinion, and we'd certainly yield to Miss Sarah and Miss Roxanne, but it would be my opinion that a vendor such as TAPS in this particular case would only have to keep those records for the most current biennial period. That would be my opinion. I don't know that if the board can say that, or you all have to say that, or what.
I can't think of a moment or a reason why we would audit the renewal cycle from 2008, for example, and require additional documents. That just, once we've licensed those individuals, I don't know that we would go back. Now, the current renewal period, that yes,
Even in the
exactly
scenario we discussed earlier for 2019,
Right.
just that 2-year window.
That's that
would be
window
all.
we're looking at.
Yeah.
I think that was a
Well,
housekeeping.
in other words, right now, 16 and 17, TAPS would have to have 16 and 17 in case there's an issue with the scenario we talked about, people not completing, and so they would have to have that, but I don't know why they would have to have behind January 1, 2016. I can't think of any reason why they would need that.
The individual lost their certificate themselves and wanted to go back to attendance records during that 1-year period that they, right now, the way the statute's written, could still renew. I can see them coming back and asking for that for the 2017 renewal we just finished. I can see them coming back through 2018 and asking for it because right now the statute gives them that extra year, but not beyond that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, I mean, they would have to. we start the audit program in
moving forward.
So the reporting period for 18-19 would not be audited until 20.
Correct.
So
If we needed their records,
So-
right? Hopefully we'll audit before then, but
we'd
yes.
have to keep the in 20, the current would be 20, so we would want to keep the
18-19 period.
the period prior.
The prior biennial period.
Exactly. That's exactly how
Yes.
to think of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Through that following year, just in
Right.
case someone is
Right.
lingering to renew, yes.
So in other words,
3 years?
up to December 31st, 2015, at this point today, TAPS could destroy those records.
That's gone.
That's the way I understand it.
Right, right.
Because that's water over the dam, as far as we're concerned.
I think it was primarily a housekeeping question to see, if they could, go back to 2010, or they wanted to keep what was needed, and, they wanted to be sure they met what the board needed. So that's the reason that was asked.
I would think due to Murphy's Law, I would say you keep them a little bit longer than that
Yeah,
because you don't
and
know
that's-
what's going to happen or
Right.
what come up. But
Right. The membership is looking forward to the possibility of a new rules book being published. And when will the proposed GPS rules that were modified at the public hearing in October be available for review? And I'll go ahead and finish that, and we can address those. Thank you again for the opportunity to offer comments and suggestions. TAPS looks forward to working with the Board of Examiners for the betterment of our profession. Respectfully submitted, Jimmy L. Cleveland, by Doug Vaught. And on the proposed GPS rules, I know it's already been addressed earlier in the meeting. Jimmy had asked me, Mr. Cleveland had asked me about, and I didn't hear Ms. Sarah say about, will there be any more public hearings, and when will they be before the rules are confirmed? You go into effect?
Everything's done.
Okay.
So everything is done on those, but they're filed with the Secretary of State right now, which means there is 90 days for public comment. You can still comment for, against, anything against those rules. You would do that by either emailing myself or Roxana. You can also, if people are unhappy with the rule, they can appear at the Joint Government Operations Committee meeting. That will be in March, most likely, because it's usually a month out, usually around the 15th. So that can happen. I believe that is actually why these rules had to go back and do a hearing. So
So there is opportunity.
this is the public comment time.
Right. It's the final window.
Yeah.
Not only did Jimmy have the question, I had gotten the e-notify last night, and as everybody else, and didn't have the chance to review it for any questions today, and had looked over it briefly, and Mr. Andrew Stokes, the president of TAPS, had presented a letter from 3 surveyors at the Huddleston Steel where we work. That's one of my personal interests, as well as the organization, is to, just seeing that they had been covered, and I'll review it and go from there. But thank the board for their time.
Very much for coming.
I appreciate it. Scott, you too. Appreciate y'all coming out.
I think Scott has another question.
Oh, you do? Yeah, absolutely. Come on. Can you state your name there just for the record, and did you sign in as well? You did great.
Scott Carter. I am the middle TAPS chapter president at the time being, and I've been charged by the board of directors to, we've had issues of people practicing without license, not only here in the Nashville area, but I know there's several other spots, East Tennessee, there's some of those going on there. And I was charged by the board of directors to get a clear direction of how we pursue and take care of these issues. And so my thought was I would like to request the board here to make up with some procedures that we could follow, that we know that the board will be behind us. Not that you guys haven't or anything, I'm not implying that or anything, but just so that everybody is on the same page of what we need to do, the proper avenues to pursue to stop this type of behavior that's definitely not in the best interest of the public or our profession. And I want to request that. Obviously, it's not going to happen today, and we understand something started to get down the pipeline to the head of TAPS so that we can start directing our members in our organization on how to tackle these problems.
So this is a question for me, and I will handle this just like I would for any other board. We ask that if you know of people that are practicing unlicensed, that you file a complaint online. We're not going to go out and hunt people down. That's not our job. That's not what they're here to do. And we need the public to help us.
Yeah, I think part of our problem is we feel like that we have done that, and that these individuals, even though they have been brought up in the past and reprimanded and or penalized in some way, they're still on the loose, not curbing their behavior. And so we're just wanting to make sure that we are doing everything that we can do in our power to correctly make sure that the next time, because it's a lot of legwork to get it all together, as you know.
No, and
so we want to make sure it's just not wasted efforts.
You're definitely not the only board that has repeat offenders or unlicensed activity. I also represent the scrap metal dealers, so I deal with this all the time. But like I said, I would just make sure all your members are aware that there is an online complaint filing system. Ask them to file those complaints. I can tell you the boards here are behind people in their perspective of, if I bring a complaint to them and I say, we've had 3 unlicensed complaints against this person in the past, because that person is not a licensee, there's only so much that they can do. Mm-hmm. We can send letters to the DAs and counties, but a lot of times, unless it's a severe, just harm to the public, it's not a priority to the district attorney's office.
Got you.
So.
Carter, I may say just a few things. We've had several instances since I've been on the board of unlicensed practice and so forth, and I've kind of tried to step up to the plate and make sure that they get the maximum that we can do. But as Miss Sarah aptly said, more often than not, our hands are kind of tied relative to unlicensed practice, even though they're kind of sticking their finger into our pie a little bit here. Our legal can only do so much. Now, we had a situation not too long ago that a group of surveyors filed a complaint, and we reacted to that complaint as our legal department said the maximum that we could do. And then they came back a few months later and talked to us about it, and basically, in as nice a way as I can do it, which is never very good, I basically chastised them from the standpoint that one of the most important things that they should do in this scenario is they should be very, very detailed. It's not a complaint, in my mind, is much better presented to our legal, our case reviewer, and this board if it's as detailed and has as much information available about it. In other words, if an individual is taking someone's stamp and stamping maps, and those maps are being recorded in the courthouse, then, don't bring us one, bring us all 32 of them. The more ammunition that can be presented in a complaint, whether it's against a registrant or a non-registrant, is invaluable to the legal and the case reviewers before it ever gets to us. And that information, in my mind, and Ms. Sarah can correct me, assists in the level that we can deal with on that within the limits of the laws that we're restricted to deal with. So, my encouragement would be, anytime it's a complaint, whether it's against me or somebody else, it needs to be as thorough as possible, as factual as possible. And unfortunately, and I think Ms. Sarah can correct me, the legal department is not real big on anonymous complaints at all. I think you all really want somebody's name tied to it as a complainant, correct?
It makes it much easier for me if I need more facts to reach out to that complainant, because the respondent may not always tell me the truth, or I may get, anonymous complaints are fine if you do what Tim said and you're super detail oriented and you give me everything I need. Because unlicensed activity, their hands get tied in a situation where if I present them an unlicensed matter and I can only give them one day or one situation, they're going to be limited to giving that person $1,000 civil penalty for that day. If I can show them, if you know somebody that's done 10 surveys and you can give me proof, I can come to them and say, I have 10 pieces of evidence for 10 different surveys. That can be $1,000 each, $10,000.
Okay.
That's where we're going to deter people if we have that kind of evidence that we can.
Does the complaint need to come from an individual, or can come from our local TAPS chapter as a group of professionals?
It can come from either. So what we've seen in our other, Roxanne and I both have scrap metal together, and it's probably a lot like other professions. They don't always like to turn each other in. It's uncomfortable for people to file complaints sometimes. So a lot of times that association will file the complaint when its members come to them and say, hey, I know someone that's doing unlicensed activities. The president will write us a letter on behalf of the association, so that president knows who to contact if we need more information. So
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Thanks.
Does that help?
Yep, thank you.
It's good to hear. We appreciate you coming out. Okay. Let's see where we were. I think that covered Mr. Rhodes and the TAPS report, which is what we wanted to jump back into. And we still had a couple of items under new business. We covered the public member. The next item was the example plat for applicants. Roxanne, I know I had submitted it to you for review and consideration. Have we gone anywhere with that?
Yes, it is number 8, new business, plat instructions. If we will open it up, it might be the last thing on the iPads that we want to look at. And so I have the email with your really good, thorough explanation of the items, and then the plat itself. If this is a great opportunity for the members to kind of discuss, and this is one of those great changes that we're looking, and you all have been spearheading to make, to add information to our website, or for us to hand applicants as they're ready for that last stage for final licensure, just to guide them on what's expected. This is great. So I will let you take over.
Okay, with that being said, that I think it was at our last meeting, the board here collectively decided that we needed to provide a little more assistance to the applicants. What we were discovering, or have been discovering over the last meetings and application reviews, are some consistent modifications that need to be made to some of the plats that are submitted for review. And one of the ideas we came up with was, can we provide an example plat for the applicants to make reference to in their drafting of their own plats. And then also another thing was, we were receiving plats that were just way too complicated. Somewhere along the line, surveyor or prospective surveyors going through the application process somehow had in their mindset that the busier, the more complicated, the more involved plat that I submit, the better it would look, toward the applicant. And that is not at all what we're after. In fact, in my personal opinion is I prefer simplicity over complication, especially when it takes time for us to review, et cetera, et cetera. So, all that being said, I took it upon myself to draft what I call just an example plat, with the intention here of providing it to the applicants online, so that they can kind of get a perceptual idea of what it is that we as a board are preferring or expecting, or something along those lines. It's certainly not, don't copy the plat, change the names, and submit it. Not at all. That's not what I'm saying. It still needs to be their original work. But I'm just trying to give an idea that look, here's a simple, I don't know what it is, 5, 6, 7-sided, basic, standard, generic boundary survey that I hope covers all the minimum standards and requirements of a standard plat for any applicant. So that's kind of the basis behind it. In my creation of this plat, I drafted it myself. It's not a real property. It's something that I just made up. The names are fictional. The area, the references, all that is fictional. The town, the city, everything is just generic as it could be. I did have the opportunity to allow other surveyors down in the Memphis area to critique it, review it, because I wanted a whole separate set of eyes, and certainly afforded the opportunity there. So I submit that to the board for their review and approval of what I call a generic plat of what the board is somewhat expecting or anticipating or requesting in an application. So with that, I certainly want the board members an opportunity here to review it, and certainly paramount to everything, if there's something missing or an error or a preference that they would like to see on the plat, I certainly would like to entertain it before it goes live on for dispersion to all the applicants there. So take time to review it. Like I said, I've had multiple long-time career licensed surveyors in the Memphis area review it. They found some things. That was interesting. They found a few things, tweaks, changes. Hey, you're missing something. Oh, yeah. So anyway, so with that, after those reviews, I just wanted to submit that for consideration. And if today is enough time for y'all to look at it and feel comfortable with it, obviously it's I think in everyone's interest to get it online as quick as we can for those future applicants. So again, it's just a generic plat. I just want to try to avoid the overcomplicated ALTA surveys with 1,000 sides and all that stuff that just goes way above and beyond what we need to be seeing. So I guess we need, if we collectively as a board are going to approve it, I guess do we need a motion or anything? It's really just administrative, isn't it?
I think it's administrative, and it's
so.
to help the applicants release,
yeah.
which is a great thing. And so if everyone agrees to it as is, I've got it in electronic version. We would add it to our website as, example of what an applicant can use to follow the standards. And
Along with the written dialogue as well.
That is totally up to you all, but I think that
I think that
spells
needs to be an
out and
integral
says
part
in
of it.
words. Yeah, so we would take, obviously, that it's coming from Jay. It would come from the board as an example of what to follow and is expected.
I think some of the comments
Language.
that Jay has made are bullet points to some problem areas that we have seen and dealt with some
Over and over.
applications.
Over and over.
Very consistently. So if those are not being seen, again, we're kind of helping that applicant a little bit, and at the end of the day, the current licensees can glance over that and have a feel for, maybe they're not getting everything as well.
And Sarah will definitely review it, but we're not, quoting the statute. This is simply a recommendation of minimum standards to include in this plat to expedite your application process. So I don't see any problem with it. And if we have additional questions today and we don't finish, I can email this so that the other two members have it as well. We tweak whatever and get it out. But if you can review it now and we have recommended language, whether on the first emailing or the plat, we can have this published tomorrow morning.
I'm looking at it on the iPad thing here. There is some funny stuff going on. I think it's an iPad issue, some blue lines and stuff like that that are not on. Okay, that is an iPad thing, right? Okay. Just want to make sure.
I think so, yes. With the software.
Crayons or something, Jay.
He had fun. No, we would lock it as a PDF, which is the most usable image view, and then just put that on the website.
All right. I guess I'll just bear the question then. If y'all are comfortable with it, or are you comfortable with it enough to be published, or do you all need some time to review?
good with
Fine with it.
You're fine with it? You're fine with it? I think that'll go ahead then.
I'm good with it. I think the immediate positive from it. I really do.
So I think our process will be, I will make sure that Sarah has this electronic versions just so, and she's not critiquing, nor am I, the plat, because we wouldn't have any idea what we're doing, but the language here, just to make sure nothing needs to be tweaked. And then this 2-page document will go on the website along with the information about, how to register, do those things, just recommendations. So that's wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I guess we'll move on to the last item under new business, the newsletter.
And that's me as well. So I know we have, I think, asked about this, and I didn't have real final decisions on how for that matter, all regulatory boards. There's several professions that are wanting or have in the past done it, at some point stopped doing the newsletters, want to come back to them. The decision is that licensees' money, which is coming from obviously renewals and things, at this point is not being used toward newsletters. That organizations, groups that we have in the industry can and probably would be better equipped to take over those and produce them. That as a licensing board, we really don't get in or don't want to get into or shouldn't maybe necessarily be in the middle of putting together the newsletter. One of the reasons also being just the manpower. You would need someone qualified in the office to proof it, put it together, add the pictures. And so right now, unless there's an educational fund of some sort by statute that requires it, newsletters are no longer going out. Obviously, that was one of Cody's strengths, and so he not only liked doing them, and actually that was his thing, but with the licensing piece and complaint piece that we are more interested in doing, there's just not the ability or the funds to and the approval to use licensees' money for that. So as it stands now, that's where we are in newsletters in general for every program.
Sorry to hear that.
I know.
Okay. Any questions on newsletter?
2 comments.
Yeah.
I feel like I just lost a child.
Yeah.
Seeing as the newsletter was my baby when I came on the board, and it went well, and so I guess hasta la vista or whatever those words are. I don't speak that language. I will ask a question. In the spirit of what you described, Ms. Roxanne, would a board member be allowed to write an article, for example, for the TAPS magazine? And would that article need to be reviewed by Miss Sarah before it went to them?
You can write it from your personal perspective, not as, I would advise that you don't write it as a board member. You're not representing this board.
Well, I understand that. I'm just asking that
No,
question.
as
I
long
understand that it's not.
As long as you don't write in there that, this is the opinion of the commission, this is how we see it. As long as it's an article that you're writing from your opinion personally, we don't have to see it.
Because that's part of the reason that we had the newsletter, was to try to appraise the other licensees of things that were going on or whatever type thing. One of the big things was to see surveyors. That was a very important thing that I don't think TAPS has ever really taken on adequately in their newsletter. I don't mean that disrespectful, but it hasn't happened unless it's been someone that's been pertinent or prudent as a former president or something of that nature that they've decided they wanted to write an article about because they recently passed. And I may be incorrect about that, but I think I am correct. And I just was curious because, all the board members from time to time get asked questions about certain things, and sometimes a little, just as Mr. Carter said, sometimes a little narrative would go a long ways for the folks that actually look at that document. And that's the reason that I asked that question.
Okay. I think that covers the newsletter.
Covers the newsletter.
Sorry about the loss.
Understand.
Okay. All right. Last item, I believe, on the agenda for this afternoon is the application reviews. I think we have one application in front of us. Roxana, you had a piece to say on that?
That
is
is correct. I do, because I want to update us on I guess, the wonderful piece that is the electronic part now. It's going well as far as the applicants submitting their applications to us. We're not at a point where I would say this is flawless and working perfectly, but we haven't gotten any pushback on the plats coming to us the right size. I think our problem right now is the system we're using, the wind server system, and the availability to quickly update the passwords for you. So Jamie and I are working on it. As you're aware, we had a dear colleague pass away that dealt with that. So we're still a little bit in the middle of trying to sort that so that we can reset your passwords and take some control. So right now in the pipeline, we have 10 applicants that one of you might have already approved and it's missing the second, or neither of you or none of you have approved them because we're missing pieces. So those 10 applicants, hopefully in the next 5-6 weeks, can be finished, submitted to test and so forth, or deferred if something's missing and keep on that path. So in the next week or two, we hope to have an answer on the system to get you all back on board. The plus is that the 3 of you now can rotate so we can move those a little bit faster. So we have no review right now other than the one applicant that we've handed you. So in that particular case, as you've been notified, that application has actually been that was denied has been vetoed by the commissioner under her statute. And so before you, the request is to review the application. It's for Mr. Lupo. And I'll let you all, since you've only got one paper copy, kind of take a look at it. I believe Jamie has presented everything we had the last time that he submitted. And that would be the only application.
Okay, yeah, and we did have an opportunity to review the application. We have the approvals
Okay.
right here, so we're good to go there.
And I can't get on the win whatever thing
Password.
program at all, 0.
Okay.
Yeah, that goes. I can,
Are you
I
on the
can,
same page? Okay.
I can get to the login screen, type in the user number and the password, and I've quadruple checked it, and it says it doesn't accept it. So
Yeah, we're kind of dead in the water.
that's kind of where I'm at.
moment.
So.
And I think that has to do with the transition in part, and we will get you to, I know it can work because we've got another board that's flowing with it. It's a matter of it being turned over to us, hopefully for Jamie and I to be able to manage, and then we'll be able to get you in flowing smoothly. So.
Yeah, it had been working in the past, and
Right.
it was fine, no complaints. It does work. It's just currently it's a password or a login issue or something. It's a technical glitch of something. Once we can jump that hurdle, I think we'll be right back.
We'll be
And
current.
hopefully, you could encourage the applicants to submit a PDF of their plat as opposed to all having to do some level of scanning or something.
Haven't been. Jamie can correct me if I'm wrong, but they are submitting it electronically themselves in the dimensions 18 by, what is it, Jamie? 24 by 48. PDF.
18 by 24. Yeah.
I think that's the correct size. Yeah, when we
that's the
said
correct
it,
size.
the 18 by 24 sounds right to me from the last vote, and they've been able to do it because again they've got some of this technology. So far we've been lucky. We've just a few of those 10 are still missing documents. So once we can get the system corrected in the password issue, we'll get all of them on through. And
All right. Any additional items to
Yes, sir.
address?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, there is.
Go
I
ahead.
need to address this with Ms. Roxana, please. We are scheduled to have a board session at the TAPS conference in March, and I believe it's March the 8th, if I'm not incorrect. Obviously, you will have to do the proper notice, Ms. Roxana, for that. I assume that at a minimum, and very possibly Ms. Sarah will be in attendance for that meeting.
have the exact date by chance?
Is it not March 8th, Doug?
March 8th.
And it's from what? It's the first one from, what is it, 8 or 8:30 to 11? I think it's 8:30 to 11 on March the 8th. You got the taps.
It's probably the same one that Kimberly and I attended, not last year, but the year before, maybe? Right? Yes, because we attended, yeah. No, I would love to, and I'm sure Sarah will as well. We just need to make sure to put it on
We're
our
a
calendar.
scheduled entity on the agenda.
Okay.
And it's and I feel like it's just my opinion. Jackie and Jay may differ, but I feel like that we should have some type of agenda from a standpoint. Obviously, Jay's got to read the meeting thing and all that kind of thing, but I think that it would be somewhat pertinent if we were able to make some type of presentation to the group, maybe on a couple of different topics, and then be able for the group to ask as many questions they want to ask. I know that when you put 300 and some odd surveyors in a room and Miss Roxanne shows up, they're going to want to ask about the renewal notice and all of those kind of things, so you will garner some very good attention, Miss Roxanne.
Absolutely. No, the last time we did it, I don't know that there were 300, but there were a lot. It was a great opportunity because we had just rolled to the new system, so we were able to explain that. But I think now that we've gone through a
You
renewal
actually went
cycle,
to the Board of Directors meetings, what you
that's
went to.
what it is.
You went to the one in January that was over here.
Yes,
This is
just
gonna,
here.
yes, this is gonna be everybody.
Yes. No, I think this is
No, this
fantastic.
is,
The more we
this
can
is
reach.
Embassy Suites, one large room, and 300 and some
300
surveyors staring at you.
Wonderful.
The only thing that I'm gonna ask, and it's only because I do this with TAR, and they put all of the commissioners and myself and the director up in front of everyone
Right.
and let them. It feels like fair game, and unfortunately, most of it comes at me because it's legal questions, and I have to be the one that takes the brunt of it. And I will tell you, we are switching up our format this year to have a moderator, so that the people in the audience have to write down their questions prior to, so that we can get a little bit of an idea of what they're going to be coming at us with. If there's a bunch of renewal questions, that kind of gives Roxana the leeway to be like, I'm going to talk about renewals. But we're kind of doing the same thing with an agenda, coming up with big bullet talking points, but we're trying to rein in the questions because sometimes it does feel like you're getting attacked. And it's not always fun.
Is that the format that you would request? The moderator and the questions?
I would prefer to have a moderator and kind of know where they're coming at us with the questions, so that gives Roxanna and I a little bit of time to make sure that we're citing the correct rules and statutes if we need to cite something, as opposed to me having to get up there and say, I'd love to answer that for you, but I'm going to have to look it up and get back with you. So.
And if the session is, you said March 8th through the 10th?
1 to 3:30.
1 to 3:30. Okay, so it's just the one day.
What, afternoon? I thought it was in the morning.
Well, at best I can see on my
No,
phone.
that's right. The membership meeting's in the morning, then,
Yeah,
on
it's first
Thursday.
thing in the morning.
That's right. Then this one's the
So I guess I'm just thinking through when would they have a chance to write down the questions
That's
to get
what
them
that
to
would
us.
be
I
my
just
question.
don't know how, having done large groups like this, that's usually the issue, right? They just get in, they've looked at the
They
material.
put like a little thing at the door so that if people had questions, they would come in at 10 till, write their question down and put it in a thing, and the moderator would kind of, while you were giving your little presentation, the moderator can kind of be looking through the questions. Because,
Who do you want to moderate?
Does not matter.
I mean, one of you can moderate if you want to. I don't care. I think we usually had
You'd be better off if you
a
get somebody
TAR
from
representative
TAPS
does our,
to be the moderator,
so, yeah.
Yeah, I would think a TAPS representative would be good.
or Galen.
I like the agenda and the information in front of them as early as possible so they know what we are already planning to discuss. Then the questions really should be about things that we miss there. That would be my thought. So if we're talking about renewals, talking about sample plat that's on the website, statistics and numbers of licensees, what to do moving forward in the industry to get new people, all the whatever topics happen to be, then if we didn't cover it, then maybe an additional, but that way we don't have 200 questions. Hopefully they can respect the fact that we're going to prepare something in advance with those topics.
Two things that I think about right off the bat, for whatever reason, is one, how do you get licensed by the current licensing law? In other words, what are the paths? And obviously, we got 5 or 6 paths. And I think that's always a question. And the group that you'll be speaking to primarily are licensees, but they are ultimately the mouthpiece for that information to their employees, others, and so forth. And if they get that information correctly, then, that may be saving Miss Jamie 22 emails next month or something. You know what I'm saying? So, that's number one. No, and number two is the exam process, because we're in a completely new environment now, newer than anybody out there knows about.
Nobody out there has it. Yeah.
Nobody out there that we're going to be talking to will have went through the environment that we're currently in. So I think it's important that we be able to explain that. I think I'm volunteering for this one, obviously. But no, those are two topics that's very important. Is, what's the path to licensure? And once you fall into one of those paths, what's the examination process to obtain that license once you're in that path? I think that's in my mind, it's a very valuable talking point to the licensees so that they can help instruct their employees, etc. Obviously there's other talking points out there as well, as you've mentioned several of them already. But I just feel like that, I realize that 2.5 hours isn't very long. It's a long time, but it's not very long. Because clearly we want to have open questions and things of that nature too. But I think we should have some general basic plan of being able to talk about something for a brief window of time, as Miss Sarah said, if for nothing else, to let you all sit there and thumb through them cards and say, hey, we can do this one, this one, this one, and then give them to Jay or whoever's up front and say, yeah, we'll do these. Go ahead and throw them out there and we'll talk about them. But I just want to be prepared for that. I don't want to, we've went, the first time we did it, we showed up and I ended up doing all talking, which was okay for the most part.
Imagine that.
I can't talk about anything very long, but that was fine. So, but I personally have encouraged TAPS to have this interaction with the board at their conference. And at least the one time we did it, we got very positive response from it. And I think, as you've aptly said, that interconnection and intertwining is invaluable to everything that we all do.
No, absolutely. We will definitely mark our calendars and start on the agenda, and I welcome if all three of you or one of you want to send us the bullet points that you think, and so we'll come up with a final, we've already mentioned renewals and change in statute, those kind of things. We'll add them, keeping in mind, like you said, 2.5 hours really isn't that long. And then we can decide who really is the expert in each of these topics and go back and forth. But
Okay, and I'll
That
make
sounds
contact with the conference chair
Okay.
of TAPS and make him aware of the format that we're looking for, moderator, et cetera, and the questions up front, things like that, and we'll see if we can get that arranged. If there's any issues with it, obviously I'll be back in
Yes.
contact with you, but
Yes.
I don't foresee that being an
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. All right. I believe that covers everything on the agenda. And Tim, you had obviously the additional question. Jackie, anything else you want to address? We certainly look forward at our next meeting on April
The 12th.
12th
12th, yes.
with our public member.
That is correct,
Great
yes.
to have them. And also, I think we'll be expecting a representative from NCEWS at
That
the
is
next
correct, to
one.
be here, and then we will send you with your agenda the time so that we can meet with the engineering group and do that piece.
Meet
So,
with them.
yes,
So
all
it'll be a
that'll
busy
it'll be a
meeting right
busy
there.
meeting.
I don't know, you may have to check and see, I don't know if NCAAS has spoken to the engineers, and if they not, it might be a good way to let them talk to both groups
I agree.
and let us have a brief with them, and then so we can move on to our stuff and they can go on to theirs and not kill the whole day.
Yeah, no, absolutely, there, without a doubt. So we're going to look at what their plan is, and if they want to, shortly talk to both groups at the same time or prefer splitting them. So many of the states have them combined anyway that I believe their invitation is to all of their
It is.
members. So,
It is.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Typically, our last item that we cover is approval of PDHs for the hours spent today. Started 9 o'clock. It's roughly 2 o'clock. It's 5 hours. Take one away for lunch. Call it 4.
I was going to say 3, but
3? I'll take 3. 3. I need a motion for it.
a motion for 3 PDHs.
All right. Got a motion. Second. Any more discussion on it? All in favor say aye. Aye. 3 it is. And with that, we will call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.